The following is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the 8-Bit Suplex here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Support for the 8-Bit Suplex is, of course, brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. And, I got to say, I'm excited for this week's episode. We had a great episode last week with Rich Latta of One Nation Radio, filling in for Sandy Gaviria. Sandy, as some of you have watched Monday Night Raw, was in the audience for the Raw Underground, getting to see firsthand the damage that Arturo Ruas can lay onto people. At least I assume that's what happened. I didn't necessarily watch Raw this week, but I did see Sandy there, so that's always very exciting. But I have to say today, this week, it is a very special, what I would like to call the dad edition of the 8-Bit Suplex, because I'm joined by my good friend here, Dan Coffin. Dan, how are we doing this week, bud?
Doing pretty good, man. I was kind of nervous when you first reached out to me to come on the show here, because this is not my forte. I've never been on a podcast, TV, radio, anything like that. And you told me, I sent you a suggestion like, hey, can you guys cover this one time? And then, not too long after that, you're like, hey, why don't you come on and talk about this suggestion? Sandy's going to be out. I was like, ugh, okay.
Yeah, no, it's definitely set you up for your in-ring debut, so to speak.
Yeah.
Listen, but this isn't like, you're stepping into the ring with The Undertaker here or anything, okay? You're stepping into the ring with another fellow young lion. So,
I mean, you're a young lion, but I'm following in the footsteps of Sandy, obviously, who's the co-host.
Of course.
And then, like two of the Mount Rushmore of the Social Suplex. Jeremy has been on here, and of course, Rich was here last week. I got to follow that. Are you kidding me?
That's true.
Rough.
That's true.
A lot of pressure.
In 7 episodes here, we've really touched the upper echelon of podcast hosts, and then, of course, unfortunately for our listeners, I've been on every episode. But it is what it is. We want to get going rolling here, and I do want to talk to you, Dan, a little bit. Since this is your first time on a podcast, we are a wrestling podcast, we are a video game podcast. Talk a little bit, Dan, about what first caught your eye about the wild world of professional wrestling.
So, I've always been into wrestling. I will. I don't know if I should credit or blame my dad for that. Because he grew up as a wrestling fan when he was a kid. So I'll start with him, right? We'll go way back.
Sure.
Just like the early 60s. My dad was born in like 49. So when he was like 10, 11, 12, early 60s, his uncle, my great uncle, Uncle Bill, up in Indianapolis was the sound engineer for both the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He was the main sound guy there. And then he was also the main sound engineer for the Pepsi Coliseum up at the State Fairgrounds, which...
Okay.
I don't know if anybody might remember, just like last year, they had an AEW Dynamite at Pepsi Coliseum last fall.
I remember that.
Right?
Yeah.
It was when Moxley faced Darby Allin at that. So anyway, he was the main sound guy, and my dad would go to visit him up in Indianapolis because we lived out in the sticks. Even when my dad was a kid, they lived out in the middle of nowhere. But he'd go and visit him up in Indianapolis, and when they'd have concerts or whatever and wrestling shows, my dad would go. And so that's how he got into it. He'd go up and see the Crusher and Dick the Bruiser and all these old guys, and he was always into it. So I don't even remember like the first match I watched, the first show I watched, the first time I was into it, because as far as I can remember, my dad was watching it with me. Now, the first time I really remember getting into it myself was the rock and wrestling era, because that's when WWF went nationwide. They were on local TV. I'm seeing local favorite, quote unquote, Hulk Hogan, on TV,
Right.
and Paul Orndorff and all that. And so that's when I started really getting into it. They had the cartoon show on TV, and then I've been following it ever since. And it's one of the things that me and my dad, we didn't really get along when I was young. We didn't have a whole lot in common, but that is one thing still to this day that we have in common, and we can bond over and talk about. Like, we've gone to shows together and everything. So ever since then, I've been a wrestling fan. I kind of got out of it. They had the WrestleMania 8, I believe it was, in Indianapolis around 93, when they had Flair and Hogan, and they had Macho Man and so it was Hogan and Sid, and then Macho Man, and then Flair. After that was when I was like a teenager, and I kind of, as you get to be an older teenager, you sort of, I'm a man, I put away my childish things, right?
Exactly.
So I still kind of followed it and knew kind of what was going on, but that was also like WWF's, the new generation and all that. So I was just like, I'm getting too old for this Zubaz pants crap.
Yeah, you were ready for that new wrestling to get off your lawn, so to speak, right?
Yeah, but it was like an old girlfriend. You're like, maybe, I kept an eye on her, kind of kept up on what she was doing. And then all of a sudden, the NWO was forming, and the Attitude Era, right back into it, man. It's like I never left.
Yeah, and now you're back. Now you've been pretty much back ever since, right?
Pretty much. There's been some dalliances where I kind of got away from it. Life gets in the way. As a fellow dad, sometimes there's many things that take precedence over, hobbies like watching wrestling.
Sure.
But I wouldn't say I gave it completely up like I did after 93 till about 97. But there's been times where I've definitely watched less regularly than I was before. Now, recently, I've really gotten back into it. A lot of that has to do with you guys, the Largo Loop, and then, listen to the Social Suplex. Before I met you guys, I had never been to an NXT show. I've gone to a couple of shows with my daughter, which I'm passing on my love of wrestling down to her. She's kind of out of it now, but there for a long time, she was going with me to the shows and stuff. She's 23 and living in New York, so that makes it hard now. But
sure.
But once I met you guys, that's when I started going to indie shows and going to the NXT. And, Jeremy and Josh got me on to New Japan. Like, I had no idea. I'd heard about New Japan. You always hear about New Japan when you're watching some of the older stuff, and you knew like the NWO had been over there and everything. But once Jeremy and Josh got me hooked on New Japan, there's like no going back. Like, I started listening to Kiss,
right,
and started learning the names, and I was watching. I was like, holy shit, this stuff is really good.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. And when I first started, and I'm fairly new to New Japan as well. Despite being friends with a longtime friend of the pod and the network as a whole, Zach Porter, I've known Zach for just about a decade now. And inside baseball, he's engaged to my sister, and so he would always wear like New Japan shirts and different things like that. And I was like, oh man, like I watched the WWE, and that's about it, right? And I'm going to NXT shows, and so for me, like, when I started kind of rolling with the bigger group of the Largo Loop, going to the NXT shows, and then it's like, oh yeah, well, we do a New Japan Pro Wrestling podcast, and I was like, okay, so I was kind of similar to you. It was like I didn't really get into it, and so I listened to a couple episodes of Keep It a Strong Style. I watched, I think Wrestle Kingdom 12 was the first New Japan thing I ever watched, which I believe was the one with Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega. I think, is that right? Is that what it was? I don't know. My
Wrong
memory.
podcast for that, man.
Listen, yeah, right, exactly. We get into much different territory on this podcast as far as wrestling goes. But Dad to Dad, our memories they are fleeting. So that's why we take notes.
Exactly.
And I don't have my Wrestle Kingdom 12 notes up because we're not discussing Wrestle Kingdom 12 on this show. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but yeah, obviously we are a video game podcast too. And the topic that Dan mentioned that he did kind of suggest to us to cover, that we've asked him now to come cover with us, is in light of the announcement of the two new Batman games coming out in the next year, both the Gotham Knights video game, which is starting a completely new series, and Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League, which is a continuation of the Arkham series, which was, I think, kind of a shock to some people that that was the continuation. But we'll get into more of that
We'll get
later.
into that.
We'll get into that because it was a little bit different, a little bit strange, so to speak. And speaking of strange, we are going to get into Impact Wrestling here, Dan. And just real quickly, did you ever watch TNA Wrestling or Impact of any sorts before, like a month ago, when I kind of let you know, hey, I might need you to come on this show?
I I parachute in occasionally, right?
Yeah,
So I didn't really watch it much until one of my two favorite wrestlers of all time, Kurt Angle, left the WWE and went to TNA, right?
sure.
And then I would parachute in and watch some of his matches, and against Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and all that. But I was never a regular watcher. It was another thing where I kind of kept up with what was going on just in the
Sure.
general wrestling business but regular watcher, no.
Yeah, same.
It
Once I
it
started
just
seeing
it,
the regular cast of characters, like, okay, here comes Hogan. Well, Sting's
yeah,
here. Uh, okay, why is Vince Russo's?
all-time
I
finesser Jeff Jarrett.
Jeff Jarrett's coming out hitting people with guitars. So I couldn't get
Yeah,
into it regularly either. And also, like, obviously, you and I are a little bit different in age, and I was that
a
sweet
little bit.
spot where my mother was very anti-professional wrestling to begin with, but also, like, if we were watching anything on Spike TV, like, it was like immediate grounds for grounding, because of course, if you're not familiar with Spike TV and the brief, I don't know, 3 or 4 year existence that channel had,
Yeah,
it was very male centric, so to speak.
right.
Um, and so
It was
yeah,
maximum TV form. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Which is why, as a teenager, I loved it.
right.
But that's perhaps for another podcast. But so let's dive right in here. You did watch, the weeks leading up. So, well, the recap we kind of see is just kind of, the Moose EC3 stuff, and of course, Eric Young, uh, getting physical with Scott D'Amore after he decides that, or well, in the process of deciding that Rich Swann is going to get the title shot at Bound for Glory to get his title, or to get the title off of Eric Young and to get some retribution for Eric Young's brutal beatdown of him.
Retribution. Oh no.
Well, that's a
Wrong
topic for
show.
that's a different topic altogether. But before we get to some more Eric Young stuff, because he is our Impact World Champion, so he is on the show, of course. We do start off the night with an X Division #1 contenders triple threat match between TJP, Trey Miguel, and Chris Bay. TJP, of course, is the guy that you love to just say, "Shut up and wrestle." But yeah, I mean, and you know what? This match, Dan, I thought he did just that. And I actually like the intensity that he showed. It's a little bit more than TJP has given us in past weeks. Trey
Yeah.
Miguel, I thought, looked like $1,000,000. And a lot of times I felt Chris Bay was kind of there. But, this is your
Yeah.
first chance to review a card here with me here about Impact Wrestling. What were your thoughts here on this match?
So let me start with a question, right? So
Yeah.
I grew up watching WWE, and a triple threat match in WWE means there's basically no rules, right?
Yes.
To me, when I hear triple threat, I think kendo sticks, right? It's Pavlovian
It
response.
should happen, right?
So in Impact, is that the same way? Is it like supposed to be no rules, or is it more like a traditional wrestling match with three guys?
Uh, Now, if this was mid-teens TNA, it would mean that all three of them would be bleeding like stuck pigs, right? I mean,
Right.
that's just how TNA was back then. Um, I would say so. There is no, to my knowledge, there's no rope breaks, no DQ, that kind of thing. In the same vein, Impact does put some interesting wrinkles on things here and there, though. Like they had a gauntlet match battle royal at Slammiversary
Hmm.
where the last two competitors had a single elimination match at the end after everyone came into the ring. and was eliminated. So it was like a traditional like battle royal type over the top rope. But then the last two competitors competed in like an actual wrestling match.
Okay.
So it's kind of yeah. So they never necessarily called it something different. They just called it the Knockouts Division Gauntlet match. So yeah, as far as triple threat goes, they don't ever talk about any different rules. But I think it really depends on who is in the match, right? All three of these guys are kind of working more babyface, so I didn't think there was going to be any cheating, so to speak, or any hardcore stuff. And all three guys are high flying, they're fast paced, and they're all really technical wrestlers.
Right.
So you know, but to answer your question, I don't think there is any DQs that would apply now.
Okay. Well, no, I'm fine with it, because like I said, in WWE, triple threat automatically, bringing that fuck shit, right?
Yep.
But like with this, it was like a three-way match where these guys were actually athletic. It was about the wrestling more than the bullshit, which
Right.
that appeals to me sometimes, right?
Right.
And I thought this
Absolutely.
was pretty good. Like you said, I mean, TJP, I never want to see his Twitter. I never want to hear him talk, but I like watching the guy wrestle,
Yeah.
I'm not
Everything's
as
just
familiar
silky
with.
smooth.
Yeah,
Silky
and
smooth.
every match I've seen of him, he does something I've never seen before. It reminds me a lot of Pentagon and Phoenix. Like those guys are high
Sure.
flyers that bring something at the time. Like he
Yeah.
fits right in with those guys.
And
That's
what's
some
crazy about
RLPW I can get with.
what's crazy about him too is that he'll come up with some submission that you've never seen. And especially too, the past couple of weeks, we've been seeing a lot of triple threats actually out of him. And going back to Slammiversary, and he's doing a lot of 1v2 submission moves. And
Like in
I
this
mean,
one, he did the camel clutch with the sharpshooter in there,
right.
right?
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen that before.
I
Now I
haven't
did have
either.
one problem with it.
Sure.
Like he started it and looked really good, and then he just let go of it, right? It's
Yeah.
like I this is more me, but when I see an awesome submission put in like that, like I don't want to see just like the guy give up giving it, right? Maybe if he's like struggling to like really lock it in and it's taking all
Yeah.
his energy and he just can't do it anymore. But that's obviously with TJP, he's not going to give you that with his face or anything. So
No.
that's not what happened there. And then the other guys didn't really break out of it either. It's just like they held it for a few seconds, got the camera shot, and then
Right.
he
And
pulled
then just kind of
pulled
right.
Trey Miguel to the side, and so that was a little thumbs down for me from that. But the move itself looked awesome, and I
Yeah.
really liked it.
Yeah, it definitely got the good optics that they were going for. And I'll let you talk about kind of your experience here watching these other guys. But like I said, I thought Trey Miguel, I mean, the guy was flying all over the place. He did a lot of the double stomp to Chris Bay when he was draped through the ropes into a deep arm drag of TJP from the top turnbuckle.
Right.
I don't know that maybe Phoenix is the only other guy I've ever seen attempt that. Because
Pretty good athleticism.
You
right?
don't normally think, okay, I'm going to bounce off of this guy who's draped across the middle rope to do an arm drag.
Yeah.
But hey,
how do they
more
come
power
up
to
with
him.
this stuff? Right? Or are they just sitting around the gym like, hey, hang here for a minute, and I'm gonna jump on you and do this, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's
Do you
like,
get to practice that move, Dan? I don't think so.
I don't know. We'll have to ask some of our people that are training to find out if they're getting taught this stuff or if
Yeah,
it just happens.
we'll approach that question with Sandy hopefully next week when she gets back. Um,
And then, like you said, Chris Bay, he was okay. I'm not really familiar with him too much. He's pretty good, but it wasn't really standout performance for me from him.
I felt like he was here's the problem with Chris Bay in this match is that I have seen better out of Chris Bay on Impact just a few weeks ago. So
Right.
I think he kind of got lost a little bit in the shuffle there with the three-man match. It is a three-way match that only went about 7 minutes. So,
Yeah.
It's a lot of the guys just trying to get their stuff in. And I felt like TJP and Trey Miguel got their stuff in a lot quicker and a lot, crisper. And I think that's why they were able to get more of it in. But, eventually we do get the win here for Trey Miguel. And I neglect to mention that our X Division champion, Rahit Raju, had come out from the back and was standing ringside in his gear the whole time, alluding to the fact that, they were going to have the X Division championship match immediately following the
Yeah, they kind of sprung that, didn't they?
Yes, yeah, that was not advertised. And as soon as I saw him come out in his gear, I said, "Oh shit, he's gonna wrestle right after. He's gonna cash in on these guys, Dan." So
Yeah,
unfortunately for Trey Miguel,
he did the genius chicken shit heel move of like, now I'm gonna wrestle you. The only one time I remember seeing something like this, I was at a SmackDown one time,
sure,
and it was when Kurt Angle was feuding with Brock Lesnar. Brock was a face at the time, and Kurt was a heel, and he was running
yeah,
with Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, and he was like,
sure,
"Yeah, you got to wrestle those two guys to get to me." And so,
right,
Brock Lesnar beat the shit out of him for 15, 20 minutes or whatever. And then in the last match was just like Kurt cheated and beat the shit out of him and left. So
right.
kind
And
of
then,
reminded me of that a little bit.
so in a similar way, but also completely different, Rahi Raju does none of the beatdown and instead gets a
Right.
roll up, grabs the tights of Trey Miguel, and beats him in 6 seconds.
Scoots.
Like you said, it is,
Efficient.
it's your vintage chicken shit heel. He's not paid by the hour, they like to speak. So,
That's right.
He got his defense in, and
Get in, get out.
now let's see what happens with the X division going forward. It's the only there's 2 belts that haven't been booked yet for Bound for Glory. The X division obviously being one of them, and the tag team belts being the other. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm getting ahead of myself because to this point we didn't have the Knockouts Championship match booked. We had thought this was going to be the case. But before we get to the next match, we got a nice little video package out of Eric Young. I've really been liking the promo work that he's been doing. I feel like he is able to really lean into who he wants to be as a character, as a villain, as the absolute maniac, right? And we've talked in weeks past, Dan, about how he was so good as the leader of Sanity, because we felt like his ability to create was more unleashed in NXT. And once they took that team out of there, they just decided that Eric Young wasn't it. But Eric Young is a legacy TNA guy. He's back in Impact. He's tearing it up. I thought this was a pretty solid video package here.
Yeah. I mean, he's believable. He seems crazy.
Right, exactly. I'd like to say on this show, he's the only guy that's ever shaved his giant beard off and looked more crazy.
Yeah. Well, I wrote something in my notes here. This is going to date me and show you how old I am. Like when I used to go to the video store. He reminds me of a character actor named Michael Berryman. And you would probably know him if you saw him.
Okay.
You might want to Google him.
IMDb's coming up right now.
So do you remember the movie Weird Science from the 80s?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So he plays a goon at the very end of that. He's also in, he's a crazy looking guy. Shaved head, weird face. He is also in The Hills Have Eyes for the originals from the 70s.
Okay. Yep. I just pulled him up. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. Once you've seen him, you're like, yeah, I know exactly who that is. That's who Eric Young reminded me of in this vignette.
Okay. By the way, Michael Berryman still active, has a project that came out in 2019. 2 of them.
Really?
3 of them. Yeah, they
probably won't be watching them.
No, they're like B grade horror flicks.
Some VOD classics. I'm
right.
Sure.
Not my cup of tea here.
Right. But no, it's pretty good. The only other thing I would say about Eric Young is in that little promo video of his is it has him against the height chart.
Yeah.
Eric Young is not 6'4".
Are you referencing the Bound for Glory commercials that they run throughout? Yeah.
They played that after his little promo there.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. Like that was the commercial they chose to play after a video that we just watched of him. Yeah, right. But
and they replayed it later in the show too. So
yeah, it's their one Bound for Glory commercial.
Right. Well, now that they're booking more championship matches, maybe next week they'll have some.
Maybe
more, right?
Yeah. I fingers crossed. I'd love to see a Kylie Ray commercial versus an Eric Young commercial for multiple reasons, Dan, that I won't necessarily get into right here on this podcast. That's more of a group chat conversation. But so speaking of Kylie Ray, her best friend Susie, formerly known as Sue Young, comes to the ring to face against the right hand of Deonna Purrazzo, the Knockouts champion, Kimber Lee. Now, Dan, I'm sure when you started going to NXT shows, was Kimber Lee there still?
I don't think she was. I don't think I'd ever seen her there. I think she was gone by the time I started.
I
Because I don't
actually
really know a whole lot about her.
Okay. So she was someone that I think they picked her up on the Indies, off the Indies, I should say, and signed her to NXT after the first Mae Young Classic. Um, and I think that she thought it was going to be better for her than it was. And I think that happens to a lot of the Impact, um, not Impact, but the indie wrestlers that kind of go and sign to NXT and then they don't
Oh
get
yeah.
pushed up the card immediately, right? Not everyone can be Candice LeRae and just sit there
Right.
forever. A lot of these people, they're the only person in their lives. They're single wrestlers, they're single people, or maybe their spouse or something is also a wrestler that hasn't gotten a big contract somewhere. Um, so, from a financial perspective, I think she kind of suffered by taking that NXT deal
Yeah.
because she only got booked on small houses. She never made it onto TV, really. I
Sold a
think
bill
she's
of goods. Yeah.
right,
You
exactly,
hear that a lot, right? I mean,
exactly.
we've all heard Rich's rants on it.
Yes,
It's a scam.
in a lot of ways it is, and you feel
Yeah.
bad for those people. But I did see her last match live with NXT, which was a house show at the St. Petersburg Armory, and
All
she
right.
got whooped in about 2.5 minutes by Shayna Baszler, who was in the process
Squashed.
of going back for her NXT Women's Championship,
Right.
or was no, was trying to get it for the first time from Ember
Okay.
Moon.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that was before I started going to the shows because Ember Moon wasn't there when I started going. She
okay,
had already been
I
bumped
gotcha,
up.
I gotcha. So yeah, so needless to say, she's obviously way happier on Impact Wrestling. She's been
Yeah.
prominent on TV, working a lot of matches since she signed. She's only been there officially about 2 months or so. Um, she signed officially with Impact right about the time that we started doing this podcast, a little bit before. So we've been along with the Impact journey of Kimberly the whole time. And her husband is actually Wince of the Rascals, if you didn't know that, Dan.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so kind of cool to keep it in house there. But what we
Yeah.
get here is Susie and Kimberly working about a 8-minute match here or so. I actually, what, I thought at times it felt a little bit draggy, but it's a lot of it is Sue
So,
Young to Susie kind of doing that character work. I thought the
so,
bowing was hilarious.
I'm not really familiar with Susie either. Like, what is her deal? I
Okay,
know there's
so
like the split personality thing, right?
yeah, so uh, I'll try and
Can you
sum this up.
summarize this?
I'm trying to sum this up in a very okay. So Su Young is kind of like a demonic presence kind of like character, right?
Okay.
Or very nefarious, evil kind of thing. And
Fiendish, would you say?
I would say nefarious. We don't use words like fiend on this podcast, Dan.
All right. Sorry. Bleep
That's
me.
okay. That's okay. But she's kind of like the undead bride kind of thing,
Okay.
right? So then she becomes friends with Kylie Ray, and one thing leads to another, and now she's kind of doesn't really remember the Sue Young part of herself. That's why Kylie's like having to like give her like, hey, go do this, or hey, go do that kind of thing. And you can see, and I think the commentary team does a good job pointing out when she taps into Sue Young's moveset.
Yeah.
Um,
They were
oh
pointing it
hey,
out in the match quite a bit. Yeah.
yeah, and I talked about this with Rich last week, but Madison Rain is, if you want to know what's going to happen on Impact the next couple of weeks, listen to Madison Rain's commentary on a match because she absolutely tips the hand like
Laying breadcrumbs,
100%.
huh?
She leaves bread loaves. So
Long-term storytelling.
exactly, just listen to Madison Rain. You'll have an idea of what's coming up. So
Okay.
obviously, I don't know if it'll happen before Bound for Glory, but I feel like we might have a Stu Young emergent story
Right.
with a feud with Kylie Ray at some point.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh yeah, you can
but
see that coming.
yeah, but we do see, Susie gets the win using Stu Young's finisher, the panic switch, which is a
Yeah.
pretty brutal move.
I was gonna say that looked pretty rough to take. It's pretty impressive.
There's a couple of moves on this episode that I kind of cringed at. We'll
Yeah.
get into one in the
There's
main
one
event.
I
The one in
really
the main
flinched
event,
at.
I think you and I probably have the same one. But the Panic Switch gets the win here. Deonna Purrazzo, of course, decides she's going to attack Kylie Rae. They fight back, and Kylie Rae, here's the thing, and I never understand this. I understand it's professional wrestling, and you always do your signature move when you're doing a beatdown, I guess. But when it's a 2-on-1, hey Deonna, don't do the Fujiwara armbar.
No way, you got to bust that out every time.
She's of course leaves her face wide open for the super kick from Kylie Rae, who does it in sandals. And
yeah, that's an
she
odd
completely
aesthetic
slips
choice
after.
there.
She completely slips. They're very fortunate that neither performer was injured on that super kick, because I could just see knees just doing this, and for those that are not watching, I took my hands and I swished them away like a swim move here. But I thought it was a good match. Good to see Susie teasing that Sue Young thing. And right now, Kimberly doesn't need the wins, in my opinion.
No, she's still building herself. The only thing I would say about the match was it was pretty long. I remember at one point Madison was like, "Oh, I'm surprised this has gone on as long as it has." I was like, "Yeah, no shit, me too. I'm right there with you. Let's wrap this up."
Yeah,
tapping my watch as I'm watching here.
Like I said, Madison Rayne on commentary will always tell you exactly what you need to hear. And it was long. Like I said, it was only 8 minutes 19 seconds according to Cage Match. It felt longer.
It did.
But I think that's just because it was so much of it was character work. And like I mentioned, there's the whole Kimberly kind of does her signature bowing kind of thing, and Sue Young bows 90 degrees at the waist to show respect, but then just does that to dodge a bunch of strikes. It was kind of it was corny, but I thought it was pretty great.
Yeah,
but
it was an okay match.
Before the match faded to black, Kylie Rae, of course, does cut a screaming promo at Deonna Purrazzo. My one criticism, Dan, always of Kylie Rae, and it's not really a deep criticism, is she doesn't seem to be very comfortable on the mic. She knows her character. She's excellent in the ring, but she's got to get those mic reps up.
So what it reminded me of was like a Charlotte Flair promo. The cadence and everything, it sounded very WWE women's promo school type.
Yeah.
And Deonna at Bound for Glory,
right?
You're
looking at the sheet and it says insert name, insert event, insert match.
And Josh on 8-Bit Suplex, I'm going to tell you all about Impact Wrestling.
Exactly. But you know what? It's okay. We now know that match is going to happen at Bound for Glory. We don't have to, sit here and say, okay, are we going to wait 6 weeks to talk about this match? Like, what's going on here? It is going to be at Bound for Glory. It is our second match announced for Bound for Glory. The first one last week, of course, Eric Young versus Rich Swann for the Impact World Championship. And as the match fades to black here, we get a commercial for hashtag Heath for Impact. Hey, Dan, I got to be honest. I was laughing literally out loud at this.
So I was smirking through the first part, and then by the end, I was popping. Yeah, it was pretty good.
Because here's the thing about Heath, and this is true of him always, right? The guy's so damn charismatic. He's a likable guy, and when he's doing this corny shit, and I was kind of smirking, kind of okay, kind of same as you. And then when Rhino gets involved.
And Rhino's Terrence doing Rhinoceros Guerin.
Yeah, and he's just standing there stiff as a board with his arms kind of held out in front of him, and he's reciting his lines. And then the cameos, once they started pumping the cameos in.
I was shocked.
David Hasselhoff.
The Hoff showing up.
Flavor Flav.
Yes.
Nancy Kerrigan.
Yes. So the one that threw me off was Chuck Norris. He looked a million years old in his cameo. I could barely tell it was him.
Yeah,
I mean, it's sad.
You're telling me it was him, and I still don't know that I believe it. Right? I
didn't know who it was at first, and then he was like, "Oh, I'll tell some Chuck Norris jokes or whatever he said." And I was like, "Oh my God, that is Chuck Norris."
It was.
That's the guy who fought Bruce Lee 50 years ago in the Roman Coliseum. He looks like shit.
It looks like he fought 50 years ago, Dan. I think that's probably what it is.
I mean, I'm not going to make fun of him to his face. He still whipped my ass, but
Oh, sure. He's certainly still a black belt. And
yeah.
then, of course, we have a little bit of a back and forth with Heath and his old friend DeLorean Brown.
DeLorean Brown. What a great name. I love that.
And then, of course, Heath's kids, I thought were pretty funny.
Yeah.
Popping in, especially his older daughter saying, like, listen, my dad's been wrestling for 14 years. He doesn't have any other skills. He doesn't know anything else.
His older daughter there was pretty seasoned on the, she looked like she'd ready for commercials and stuff.
Listen, man.
She was reciting those lines like a pro, hitting her spots.
Right, dude. Perfect timing, cadence. The younger kid even wasn't bad.
How well his other 18 kids do at that,
It was funny, Dan, and Rhino pointed this out to us a couple of weeks ago on Impact Wrestling when Heath was saying that he had a bunch of kids, and Rhino was like, dude, you have 2. And that was the first time
like he had 20, and I was like, I don't know, was that many?
That's the first time I think I had ever heard the actual number of kids that Heath Slater has, and it is in fact 2.
Yep.
So,
well, I'll tell you what, as a dad, you know that having 2 kids feels like having 20 a lot of times. So.
Having 1 kid feels like having 20 a lot of times, especially when they're sitting there rooting through the refrigerator. And my kids are at the age right now, right, where if they want something out of the fridge, they open the fridge, and then they'll open to the drawer that the juice pouches are in. They'll get a Capri Sun out, but then they can't shut the drawer. So they just leave the fridge door open.
They don't even ask you to come to it, huh? They just
they're just kind of like, I can't shut the drawer, and then they just kind of leave the fridge, and like wherever I am in the house, I gotta.
Right.
It's one of those times where like I'm happy I don't have a mansion, right? Because I can just
have to call you on the intercom.
Yeah, exactly. But we get to roll on through here with some more backstage stuff. Dan, I don't know if you've noticed this as you were catching up on Impact. Impact likes to string a lot of this stuff together in between matches to just kind of give you a prolonged break in the action, and then also not kind of do this one kind of thing that you get a lot of times with wrestling. You'll get your backstage, your vignettes, your commercials, all of that kind of just hits in a row. I kind of like it. Some people might not. It's different it's a different presentation than what we get everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna put it somewhere. I like that it's different. How about that? It's better than the same cookie cutter. Every week is the exact same. This minute is this minute is that. Here's our JVC kaboom of the week, and then they go right into the match, and then and a promo and then a commercial. Yeah, I like them mixing it up.
Yeah, it's nice.
I'll tell you right now, I was pleasantly surprised watching Impact. Like I was leery at first, but I'll wait till the end to give you my final declaration. But
and that's totally good. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say too, like when I first started talking to Jeremy about putting this show on the network, and I said, we'll cover something different, so that the Social Suplex Podcast Network listeners are not just going to sit there and hear about Impact, or not Impact, but about AEW and NXT and all this stuff for the 4th time. We'll cover Impact.
Yeah.
And I hadn't watched Impact other than Slammiversary to that point, Dan. So I signed up. I was like, oh shit! Like, what did I get myself into? But I've been very pleasantly surprised. It's an 85-minute show. It moves pretty quick with no commercials. So I don't watch it live. I don't know anyone that has Access TV personally.
That's the thing. I would probably watch this more if it was more accessible, right?
Yeah.
I don't get Access TV.
Yeah.
And Twitch, I don't think they have the replays available, right? They
don't do the replays, but you can watch it live. I think twice. Right. I think they show it 8 p.m. and then I think they show it again at 11 p.m. When they do the other Access TV showing.
Like the West Coast.
The rebroadcast West Coast feed.
Okay.
But
yeah, because if it was on a regular because that's another reason why I never really watched it before, because it was a jumping around between Pop TV and some like rural tractor channel or some shit. I don't even know. Right. It's like that really makes it hard to enjoy your product when I can't find it. So
exactly.
I mean, they do have Impact Plus, but I mean, are you really going to spend money on that if you haven't already been introduced to it on something? So it's kind of tough.
It is a tough sell, and I will say this, and the biggest value to Impact Plus not to give them any free plugs or anything, but the biggest value is the back catalog,
Right.
which,
Oh yeah.
we got to see a back catalog. They kind of do this sometimes if they're trying to fill up a little bit of space in the night. They'll show like a quick, from the vaults moment.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, they
this
showed
week.
one a little bit later. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we'll get to that, but let's say the back catalog has some awesome stuff. If you watch AEW and you want to see more of Proud and Powerful, and you want to see more Lucha Bros, you want to see some Eddie Kingston, go check out Impact because all those guys were there for
Right.
several years, and they had some. Proud and Powerful, of course, LAX at the time, and Lucha Bros have some absolutely. If you're into tables, ladders, chairs, and thumbtacks, um, definitely go check out those guys' matches on Impact Plus backlog. And of course, you can add that onto your Fight TV subscriptions also. Not to give them a free plug either.
Right.
But
So
yeah,
do
definitely,
they have the whole TNA library then?
I believe so.
So I can go back and watch my Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe and
Yeah,
watch some AJ Styles,
you can watch I believe every pay-per-view that they've done is on there.
some Jay Lethal.
Yeah, exactly. Tampa Bay local Jay Lethal, trainer
Yeah.
of course of our my co-host Andy.
I can go just
yeah.
put aces and eights on repeat and just watch those guys all day long, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Go check out the back catalog. Hey, listen, if WWE is going to sell you a network subscription for $10 and advertise the big draw of it being the WCW library, I'd argue that, Impact's got a pretty good one too.
Yeah.
But hey, it's not for everybody, but for me, I like going back and watching that stuff. But
Yeah, it's good.
we'll get back into the show here a little bit after the little side thing. Backstage, we see the Motor City Machine Guns are talking to the Good Brothers, of course, Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson. They're kind of saying, hey, man, you owe us a thanks for stepping in last week when the Rascals couldn't go. And the Rascals are, for some reason, very pissed off at the Good Brothers, which I can't really comprehend why, because they weren't the ones that kicked the crap out of them backstage.
Right.
But the Rascals decide they want the Good Brothers in the ring to earn some respect. Doc Gallows, of course, plugs his beer, which he does every week now. His Talkin' Shop Brewskis, or Talkin'
Have you tried one of those?
No, and I don't think that I ever will. And a side note, the last gimmicky celebrity beer that I had was the Hops beer that was, in fact, brewed by the Hanson brothers, of course, famous for their song Bop.
Yeah, sounds delicious. No, thanks.
I'll be honest with you. I'm going to lay it straight here. I mean, it was a 4-star beer. I mean, it was a pretty solid IPA. But that's perhaps for the beer podcast, which I don't have one. I probably could, but I don't have the time for it. So
that falls under the purview of the Dad Pod too.
I think so
We drink
too.
beer.
Yeah. I mean, listen. I mean, you got to talk brewskis, right? That's what Doc Gallows teaches me. You just got to be a good brother and talk brewskis.
Yeah.
So, but after that, we get the aforementioned Bound for Glory 2013 clip of AJ Styles versus Bully Ray with Taz on
everybody's
commentary.
favorite.
It's funny to see how many such serious top talents passed through the doors of TNA Impact, and they squandered it. And I'm not talking about Bully Ray when I say that, just for the record. just so we're clear on that.
The
Dan.
exception that proves the rule. Bully Ray.
But I mean, AJ Styles, you've mentioned already. Samoa Joe is there. Kurt Angle has some killer matches still in TNA. Before he really fell off the cliff after his prime. Yeah, EC3 the first time was really good. Eric Young was always really good. Brian Myers, who we'll talk about in a few minutes here, he was really good there. You got, they even had
the Hardy
Boys there, right? Now Jeff Hardy, of course, has an infamous championship match with Sting that we won't get into. But Matt and Jeff came up with the whole concept basically of cinematic wrestling while at TNA, right? Young Bucks, of course, were there. Of course, they weren't called that. So there's just so many guys that have passed through those doors. New Japan guys came over on excursion and stuff.
Okada was there, right?
Okada was there. I watched a match with Okada in it a few weeks ago. It's just kind of like you're just looking at it and you're just like, wow, how many good talents have come through
Yeah.
here? And
Jeremy showed me some match with Tanahashi in it the other day.
yeah, and then you're just looking at it and you're like, if they did not try to go head to head with Monday Night Raw, I think they would still be prevalent as the number 2 brand. That's my personal feeling on it. Of course, if they did that today with the roster that they have now, or what they had then, you might be able to say, all right, now Monday Night Raw is vulnerable enough you can pull some viewers off of it and run a show on Mondays. But at the time, I mean, people were still watching cable television, and Monday Night Raw was still pulling in big numbers, and it was a dumb move.
I'll tell you what, man. I remember when they switched to Monday nights and made a big deal about it. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give them a chance. I'm gonna see what they got. And I watched one show, and I think it was Hogan and Bischoff and all this. And I was like, you know what? I saw this shit,
right.
10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Mid to late 90s WCW again. Right.
Yeah.
I felt the same.
It was sad.
It was, but hey, listen, if you have an Impact Plus subscription, go back and watch that Bound for Glory 2013 match. I watched a little bit of it today after the fact. And it's a pretty brutal, AJ Styles is still AJ Styles. And of course, Bully Ray is, going to take some big lumps and give some big lumps. And,
right. Yeah, say what you will about him. He does take some nice bumps,
Listen, he's EC Dub for life. And he will definitely take unprotected chair shots until the day he dies. And which, as many unprotected chair shots as he's taken,
I'm okay with that.
Could be sooner than later.
He needs to take more.
Yeah. So after that clip, we come back. We see a EC3 vignette talking about controlling his narrative.
EC3, what's he mean by that, Josh?
Yeah. Well, might be talking about his time in Orlando, Florida. Of course, he's been setting up this big match with Moose. To me, this is an obvious collision course for Bound for Glory.
Right.
I'm looking forward to that match when it happens, because I don't know if you got to see Moose when you were watching back. Moose is extremely talented, super athletic guy. EC3, we've seen what he's capable of, both before his 2 matches or whatever it was in NXT, before they put him on main event purgatory, and going back to his TNA run when he was the TNA World Heavyweight Champion. So I'm excited. I don't need to see as much video and recap of those 2 guys as they've been given. I'd be okay if they took a week off of it to just let us kind of simmer on what's been happening. But I thought he's cutting good promos in the videos. We'll see what happens when it's a live mic. If he still got it, I think he does. I think he does too.
I don't think he was ever given the opportunity really in NXT, and he definitely wasn't when they, quote unquote, called him up and he stood in backstage with a mirror for 8 weeks or something and never said anything.
Yeah, and then got replaced with Mojo Rawley in the mirror.
Yeah, like you said, we've seen this guy before. We know he can go. He just needs the opportunity, and I think he really wants to prove himself with this match with Moose. And it might steal the show, man. Those guys can go.
It might, they'll. I mean, on the pay-per-view, they'll get probably 12, 14 minutes. Let's see what you guys can go. I mean, those guys can both really ramp it up. Of course, it would be a step up in opponent for Moose from his last pay-per-view opponent, which was Tommy Dreamer in a old school rules match.
How dare you?
listen. Obviously, I am the president of the Dreamer Club. Okay, and we'll get into some more Tommy stuff. But when he wrestled Moose at Slammiversary, Moose slammed him onto thumbtacks, and I said, man, I really don't ever need to see Tommy Dreamer go through any more thumbtacks. And that's, of course, when I received the direct message that I talk about so much on Twitter from Tommy Dreamer himself.
Tommy Dreamer, right?
My best friend, Tommy Dreamer. He sent me a message back that said, you and me both. So, obviously, great to see he has a pretty good humor about himself, as always. Speaking of, we get into some Johnny Bravo and Rosemary wedding planning with the quote-unquote groomsmen. Which for some reason, Johnny Swinger has selected the Deaners, Alicia Edwards, Johnny Swinger, Crazy Steve, and of course his best man, Falaba. Now,
so I haven't been watching for very long, but basically they just ran out of shit to do in Wrestle House, and so they shoved them all into this story, right? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, I think they got positive reactions from those characters being in Wrestle House.
Yes. I'm sad that
And
it's not around. I mean, I was hoping to talk about Wrestle House on my debut show, but we
well,
don't get to.
you know what, Dan, this is our show. This is the Dad Pod, and as dads, we set the rules. Let's talk some Wrestle House because I miss it too.
It was surprisingly entertaining. Right?
It was entertaining.
I wasn't expecting much, and it over delivered. So
it did because everything is like so like overacted. It's so cheesy. It's so corny, but like coming out of it, right? I think AC Romero looked great doing all the Wrestle House stuff. He's obviously someone that can shine on the mic, and he's a great story talking about his weight loss and different things. Obviously, he's still tagging with Larry D. When Larry D did the Lawrence D stuff and was wearing the ring rust cologne as a tongue in cheek, like he's got ring rust because he's not wrestling, he's at Wrestle House, right?
Right.
I mean, just little things here and there were just so funny. Obviously Tommy Dreamer being the booker of the house, and a little bit of inside baseball of what we see. Of course, we know Tommy Dreamer does a lot of booking.
It seemed like their answer to BTE kind of, but it was on their show a little bit.
Yes,
like with the storylines and the inside baseball and stuff like that.
And honestly, and Being the Elite obviously is a fantastic YouTube series. It's very entertaining, but for the casual fan that wants to know what's going on off screen, it adds in that extra viewing, right? You got to go to YouTube. It's not even on the AEW channel. You have to seek it out. And it's obviously, I'm not knocking the show at all, and it obviously does very well on YouTube. Lots of viewers worldwide. But if you're talking about especially a company like Impact, that if they did Wrestle House on YouTube, it would fail tremendously. Yeah. But I think the way that they set it up, the way they presented it, it was almost like that Surreal Life, kind of, throw all your celebrities in a house, see what happens kind of show. I thought everyone did great on it.
I feel like in the episodes I saw, they didn't overstay their welcome with it. I feel like if this is on, some other larger shows, maybe they would like go back to it like 6 times a night and just run it into the ground and everybody'd be sick of it, right?
Right.
But I think that, like, they pretty much did like one big segment a show, and that's all you really need to get those guys over.
Yeah, I will say that the brawl between Team Triple XL, Larry D, and AC Romero and the Deaners, which I think might have been the last episode. I think it was the last segment that we ever got of Wrestle House. I felt like that brawl went incredibly long. It was very entertaining. You had your ping pong spot, you had your car spot.
It was their grand finale.
You had your elevator spot, you had your stage spot. I mean, you name it, there was a spot for it. But yeah, no, I agree, man. And it's funny that you mentioned that these are all the characters from Wrestle House now involved in this story, with the exception, of course, of Kylie Ray and Susie, who have other business to attend to. Alicia Edwards. Right, exactly. Alicia Edwards had a brief break where, of course, she almost got the pile driver from Eric Young after she smacked the shit out of him. And, thanks to Tommy Dreamer for the save on that one. But, we see some argument start happening here because Johnny Swinger thinks that the swing man's the only guy that could be the best man. Not this guy, not Fallah Bahh. And, of course, Tommy Dreamer peeks around the corner with a callback to Wrestle House, trying to book the match. And, of course, Bravo shuts him down and says, listen, man, we're not in Wrestle House anymore.
So sad when I heard him say that. I was so disappointed.
I know. And you see the look of anguish on Dreamer's face, right? Like,
poor Tommy. I wrote that on my notes, like, poor Tommy.
Listen, that man's been trying to get himself over since 1989, okay? I mean, he's done a pretty damn good job.
Hey, he's over on this show.
He is. And what's funny, too, is I feel like Impact has a lot of younger viewership that maybe don't know Tommy Dreamer as well as even like people my age would know Tommy Dreamer, because that whole like ECW late 90s rolling into the ECW WWF, and then of course he stuck around, then went to TNA, and he's kind of hovered around TNA pretty much since he left WWE. He and Christian, I think, went about the same time over there. who was someone we forgot to mention earlier when we talked about TNA
Oh yeah,
Legends.
another one of my favorites. Yeah.
So, really good stuff in this little backstage segment. Kind of, good corny stuff. And of course, we do find out later on that the match does get made between Johnny Swinger and Fallah Bahh for next week. Of course,
Right.
though Tommy didn't book it, but it probably came from Scott D'Amore if I had to choose a kayfabe reason there.
Right.
But then the next segment we get is Tommy Dreamer in another shirt confronts Brian Myers after he flips the table angrily. And I thought this was really good promo work out of both of these guys. And it
These guys are
really,
professionals, man. They know how to do it.
they know how to do it. And of course, Brian Myers, of course, is the quote unquote most professional wrestler. Um, and it sets up what I think is going to be probably one of those undercard matches at Bound for Glory. They talk you a little bit about how Brian Myers is now the same age that Tommy was when Tommy hired Brian all those years back. And I believe that was a reference to hiring him at TNA. I don't believe it was a WWE reference because Tommy wasn't doing any of that when Brian went over there. But a little bit master student, a little bit father son. They leaned into that father son narrative pretty hard. Both guys face to face really gave a pretty solid promo here.
Yeah, I'm excited to see them go against each other. I wrote down here, kick his ass, Tommy. I want to see it.
Oh, dude, right? As the dads, we want to see the dad character whip that young guy's
Definitely.
ass.
You know who we're siding with, yeah.
And we're saying young guy, but Brian Myers is like 39 years old. So
hey, he's young to me.
But
little whippersnapper.
He's in between us. But of course, Tommy Dreamer is pushing late 40s. Amazing that Tommy's still he's going to find his way to get booked into another pay-per-view in 2020.
A lot of miles on that chassis. Yeah.
And I think I've mentioned it before on the show. I listened to Tommy, I believe one time on the Edge and Christian podcast years ago, and he was saying he really struggles to fly places, so he tries not to book himself out west because his body's so banged up to be cramped up in a coach airplane. It takes him a full day to recover. And a lot of times
he's not a small guy. He's got to wedge himself in those seats and bend up. I mean, I'm not a big guy, and it kills me to fly across country. So
well, and then
I
also,
imagine.
You and I, Dan, also haven't taken 20-foot bumps through tables.
That's what I mean. Yeah, like if it hurts me, I know it hurts him, right?
Just the change in pressure alone probably does its damage.
Oh yeah.
But speaking of changing pressure, we have Cody Deaner walking out to the ring with Cousin Jake. This is the tried and true wrestling trope of this guy has a match. They don't announce who the opponent is, of course, because there is no plan for a match. Because Eric Young comes out and he decides he's going to dome Cousin Jake with the belt, and then he takes out Cody Deaner, brings him to the ring, starts beating the piss out of him, gives him the pile driver, and I don't know about you, but
that was a really powerful pile driver too.
It was a pretty strong. Eric Young hits a great pile driver.
He does.
But I don't know about you, Dan. When someone sells the pile driver by doing the tremors of their body, like they're paralyzed, I'm not a fan of that. I just can't watch that anymore.
The only person I've ever seen that really pulled it off well to me was Devon Dudley when he'd take a big hit and he'd shake and I'd be like, oh man, maybe he's really hurt. I got worked, but
yeah, exactly. Of course we see Cody Deaner's of course working the hand, kind of freaking out.
Yeah,
he's
a
legs are moving.
little overdoing it there.
A little bit, but you know what? It's still a hell of a pile driver from Eric Young. Yeah. Of course, he starts to work the knee and the ankle like he has with everyone else trying to ruin their career. He's screaming, that it's all Scott D'Amore's fault. It's all Rich Swann's fault. He should have stayed out of it. Should have just let it go. And of course, Cousin Jake tries to, intervene. Well, he winds up getting the piss beat out of him too. And then eventually they get the upper hand, and Eric Young rolls to the outside, screaming at him. But then, tried and true, he waits until they turn their back. He gets back in the ring and then just takes the ever-loving piss out of Cousin Jake.
What a dastardly move.
And right. But what's funny is I can't remember too much in wrestling, Dan, where the heel leaves the ring and then re-enters it. I can't remember that happening too much.
Well, yeah, that's what this segment went on quite a bit, right?
It did. It did.
I mean, he was beating on him for a while. I think it might have went on a little. They were trying to fill some time, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and what's funny too is the commentary team the whole time are like, "Is anybody coming out? No, nobody."
Vampiro, play my music.
Right? Yeah, no, it's track 7. It's track 7. But yeah, and then eventually, of course, he does give the pile driver also to cousin Jake. Scott D'Amore comes out, starts yelling at him. He gets physical with Scott D'Amore, and then surprise, surprise, Eddie Edwards comes out and
Right.
gets the save. Now, what kept Eddie Edwards from saving the Deaners, I'll never know. But he
He
does
didn't
save
care
Scott
about them.
D'Amore. Well, he hardly cares about
He's gonna
Scott
save the
D'Amore either.
boss, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. But and then he announces after that they go backstage, and Eddie Edwards is furious with Scott D'Amore because he gave away his contracted rematch. Because I don't know if you are aware of this, Dan. Impact keeps the champions are entitled to a rematch clause.
Okay.
That's still prevalent there, like WWE used to have before they
They said they
decided
got
just
rid of it, then they didn't. Yeah, whatever.
back and forth, right?
Who knows
Impact's
what they're
never
doing?
gotten rid of it. You're entitled to
I
your
like
rematch.
consistency. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. So Eddie Edwards gets announced that he's going to be trying to get the title back from Eric Young at Victory Road, which is going to be on Impact Plus the first Saturday of October. This is the first that they've said anything about it. I don't know if they're trying to
Yes.
drum up some viewership ahead of Bound for Glory. But anytime that you put your championship belt on the line, in a small pay per view, the month of a big pay per view,
Right.
this belt's not changing hands.
Yeah. Um. So tell me a little bit about Mr. D'Amore. I don't know a whole lot about him. Is he just like a booker, or what is his deal?
Yeah, so he's the executive vice president of Impact Wrestling. So he's
Okay.
kind of the quote unquote the guy in charge. He's the booker. He's the whole
So
nine
I
yards. So
so
he's
I
your
wrote.
kind of GM
Go ahead.
character, so to speak.
Okay, I kind of thought that. I wasn't sure. I was just like a guy in a suit. So he looks like Bruce Pritchard to me. So I wrote down on my notes that he's from now on he's Deuce Pritchard to me.
I like it. I will say that he's not booking things like Bruce is these days. Thank God.
No, it's
He's
just the
actually
look. That was the only thing.
just the look. He does have that kind of and he did work for WWE for a time.
Okay.
But yeah, he is the co-executive vice president, so to speak, of Impact Wrestling. He
Okay.
was a professional wrestler and trained by Al Snow, and so he's got a lot of years in the business,
Yeah,
certainly.
his name sounds familiar. I've probably seen him at some point somewhere.
Yeah, I'm gonna see what years he was there at WWE. Or maybe he didn't go there, or he was like around there. I don't know. Yeah, so he worked at TNA from '03 to 10. So you probably saw him,
Oh yeah,
around then.
definitely.
And I did misspeak. There was rumors about him going to WWE. I don't see that he ever actually officially went there.
Hmm.
Um, but he did go when Jeff Jarrett left TNA. He did go and was the vice president of internal relations at Global Force Wrestling, the
Oh
Jeff
wow,
Jarrett promotion. So,
great.
but it's funny yeah, I know, right? It is something to note here. He did train a lot of people, a lot of professional wrestlers, and this is something I'm finding out for the first time as I'm looking at his page here. But Petey Williams,
Okay.
Rhino,
Wow.
Chris Sabin, Alex
Okay.
Shelley, Moose, the glorious Bobby Roode, Sienna, who we know on NWA, Gail Kim, trained under Scott D'Amore,
Wow.
um, and
Big
then
names.
Eric Young also, ironically, trained under him. And this is a name that kind of shocks me that he ever trained with him. And it may have been an excursion type thing. I'm not sure. But Kushida trained under Scott D'Amore as well.
Huh.
So interesting, especially since the wide
Yeah.
variety of styles there. But yeah,
Yeah.
but it's good to see Scott D'Amore getting work still. Getting he probably as the EVP doesn't want to be taking those pile drivers, so I'm sure he's very happy. Eddie Edwards saved
Not
him.
from Eric Young. He doesn't. Hell no.
No, and not from Sammy Callahan either, Dan, which we learned about in this next match.
Right.
Now, I joked around with you, Dan, that this next match, which is of course Rob Van Dam accompanied to the ring by the one and only Katie Forbes versus Sami Callihan. Now, this has been a pretty ugly back and forth feud, and they announced that there's going to be a weird stipulation here. And to me, this smelled like bullshit from the start, which was if Rob Van Dam wins, Katie Forbes gets 5 minutes in the ring alone with Sami Callihan because she wants to beat the piss out of him. And
it was odd. I've never seen that before.
Very odd stipulation. But then again, we haven't seen anyone like Katie Forbes before, Dan. At least I haven't. She's very unique.
Yeah, she stands out in the crowd. I'll say that.
And she definitely takes it from TV PG to TV 14 when she's in the room.
Yeah, the real rated R superstar.
Right, Rob Van Dam and Katie Forbes. Of course, I've said this before in this podcast. When we first started this, I said, listen, we're going to try and stay positive. We're not going to say things that like we hate about the show. We'll just skip it. And I joked and I quipped, like, for instance, anytime RVD has a match, we probably won't talk about it much. But for the most part, RVD's kind of made me eat my words, but it just looks like the guy can still work a pretty competent match here. Now, this match goes 9 minutes, 7 seconds, probably a little on the long side for Rob Van Dam these days. And it doesn't help that Sami Callihan's the other guy because I don't think he can go very long either.
Right.
And for him, it's an out-of-shape thing, not an old thing. But some pretty good hard-hitting stuff. Rob Van Dam still hits his kicks pretty good.
He still knows what he's doing, man.
There was a scary moment when he hit the Rolling Thunder on the outside. It looked like he got caught on the pad.
It looked rough.
That was oof. Yeah, maybe stick to doing that one in the center of the ring, Rob. But, of course, we get some shenanigans in the finish here where Katie Forbes sprays hairspray in the face of Sami Callihan. And then Rob Van Dam does a weird kind of scissors to the waist takedown with his legs, rolls up Sami Callihan and gets the win, setting up the 5 minutes for Katie Forbes to beat up Sami Callihan.
Yeah, it's pretty fortunate that the stipulation paid off at the end of this. I was shocked.
Here's my thought going into it, Dan, was, okay, Sami Callihan's going to lose on purpose, or he's going to eat the pin, because he's been talking about how he hates Katie Forbes the past couple of weeks.
Right.
So I was thinking, okay, he's either going to just let Rob Van Dam pin him real quick, and then do some with a brass knuckles or something, and then just beat the piss out of Katie Forbes. Or I thought he would just start chair shotting him outside, and then here's your 5 minutes, and then just beat her. Now the end result was what I thought it was always going to be, but it took a little bit of time to get there, of course, because at first Katie Forbes is hitting him pretty good. She does her patented hip attack. They call that a hip attack, Dan. It's more of a ass attack. But there's some good beat up stuff. And, of course, Rob Van Dam brings a chair into the ring. And, of course, the rule of wrestling, Dan, you bring in a weapon, you die by the weapon.
Always. Every time.
You set up a table, you go through the table, right?
Yep.
You don't set up the table for somebody else to go through. That's not how it works.
It's kind of like Chekhov's gun, only it goes off on you when you bring it in.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, Rob Van Dam, after they beat him up, he leaves the chair unattended in the middle of the ring. Sami Callihan, of course, pops up and chucks the chair off of his face. Rob Van Dam.
It looked pretty stiff too.
It looks pretty stiff chair throw. Of course, but you'll notice the difference between that chair throw, Dan, and the one that we saw Sammy Guevara hit Matt Hardy with, is this chair was folded still and was not thrown in such a way that the legs would be going towards the face. So it does look like a pretty stiff shot, but it is the seat of the chair that catches Rob Van Dam. But then, of course, Rob Van Dam takes a tumble from the top turnbuckle to the outside, which at 49 years old, I don't necessarily need to see Rob doing.
Nope.
But then, of course, Sami Callihan gets his hands on Katie Forbes and delivers an extremely stiff pile driver.
Yeah, man, that was rough.
I don't know
who's worse, Eric Young or Sami Callihan, man. These guys and their pile drivers are killing people.
They really are. So it kind of, obviously the past few years watching WWE, we don't see pile drivers, right? They got rid of pile drivers a long time ago,
right.
With the exception, of course, because Undertaker is Undertaker, he can do the tombstone.
Right.
I understand two things from watching this episode of Impact and why WWE chooses to do what they do with both pile drivers and intergender wrestling. First is pile drivers, one slip, or like if Katie Forbes' head is an inch lower, that's really bad, right? And in addition to that, and I'm not saying this is not me being sexist, misogynist, anything like that. I'm just speaking from a presentation perspective only. It does not look great for a male professional wrestler to have a personal vendetta that he's going to take care of with violence against a female wrestler.
Yeah.
That optic isn't great.
I
understand.
Time is past, right?
Right.
I mean, that's not something we need to.
We don't need to see Bubba Ray putting Mae Young through tables anymore, right?
Right.
That thing to me seems to be done with. I'm all about, okay, if you want to have like, I know like Kylie Ray wrestles on the indies against men. I know Kimberly does it. I know, fill in the blank, it's happening all over the indies. I know Lance Storm got into a lot of hot water when he talked about this on Twitter, saying like a lot of that is from pressure of the locker room. It's like, oh, we didn't book enough women. You got to wrestle a dude now.
Right.
And so it's either still get your paycheck or don't, or, and wrestle this dude that you don't necessarily want to wrestle, or get the hell out and we just do one match less, right?
Right.
So I understand the optics now because people have been critical of WWE not wanting to do that. And AEW said they're not going to do that. Cody is against it. He didn't get as much backlash as Lance did for some reason. But I understand it now watching that pile driver in a vacuum. If you're someone that's tuning into your show for the first time and you just see a big man just decide to drop a woman on her head and then just toss her like she's like a piece of garbage after, because she landed stiff on that pile driver and he just kind of chucks her, right?
Yeah.
It's not great optically in a vacuum. If you know professional wrestling and you know the story leading up, you kind of understand where it's coming from and what took it to that place. But the whole male wrestler is feuding with another male wrestler, but he's not mad at the other male wrestler. He's mad at the female that's accompanying the male wrestler and wants to beat her up. I don't know. That sets off some bells in my head, Dan.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's I don't want to sound like super woke or anything, but it's you got to play to the times, right? I mean, people don't want to see that, especially new viewers. Like, that's not going to bring anybody in. Like us, we've been watching wrestling for a million years. Like you said, we're not going to turn it off right away when we see it. But we're just like, you don't need to do that. But like new people coming in, they're going to see that and turn that shit off instantly. Like, I don't want to see that.
Yeah, and I'll say too, like, like say if my wife were to be watching that with me, right? She doesn't watch as much wrestling with me anymore. But if Colleen had been in the room and she'd be like, wait, why is this guy doing this? That's not cool. Like, she'd be like, why are you watching this? And it's, thank God that my wife never watched wrestling in the late 90s or early 2000s.
Right.
Because obviously the objectification and just pure accessory of women in wrestling was at an all-time low as far as the content goes. But man, 2020, I don't want to see a non-competitor get a pile driver, period.
Yeah.
I don't want to see most people take a pile driver, even if they are the competitor. There's a few people like I trust. Like if I see Suzuki give someone a Gotch-style pile driver, I'm not worried about the safety of the other person. I'm not worried about the safety of the person with a tombstone pile driver. I feel like it's a little safer. But man, you see it too much on the indies where these guys do these running, jumping, seated pile drivers, and those are the ones that we saw, Stone Cold break his neck on, right?
Exactly.
We don't. It's cringe. I understand it and why they want to do it. It's a brutal looking move. It certainly sells the end of the match.
Right.
But yeah,
it's brutal looking because it's brutal. They shouldn't be doing it.
It's a bad bump. It's a bad bump. It really is. But anywho, we get to the main event here, Dan. We get the return of Tennille Dashwood, and she's squaring off against favorite of the Largo Loop, Jordan Grace.
Yeah.
I thought this was a pretty solid main event here.
That was pretty good.
9 minutes, 3 seconds. So a little bit shorter than some of their other main events they've had recently on Impact. But, Tennille Dashwood, of course, comes out with her personal photographer, Caleb with a K, which is the dumbest geek of a prop person I've seen yet since I've started watching Impact again. And I mentioned earlier that there was a bump from this main event that made me cringe. And it was, of course, the Michinoku driver that Jordan Grace. When it first hit, Dan, I said, "Shit, she didn't get her head through."
That's what it looked like at first, right?
I thought she landed square on top of her head.
Yeah, I had to rewind it a couple of times too. I was like, "Oh my God, she just squash her?" But then they showed the replay and everything, and you could see she got her head under there.
Just last second. And I think that's a testament to both workers. Tennille's obviously, she's had a very long career. Jordan's a little bit newer to wrestling, but that's also because she's like super young. She's like 22 or something. But they both were able to get that around, so there's no serious injury there. Because man, if she had done that move to a lesser opponent that has not taken a lot of bumps like that, like Tennille has, I feel like we would have been hearing about some serious injuries out of the world of Impact.
Yeah, it was a close one. It made my sphincter pucker a little bit when I saw it.
A little bit. Yeah, like sit up a little straighter in your chair. And go, my notes, I wrote Michinoku driver, yikes.
Yeah, I wrote Michinoku driver about broke her neck.
Yeah, that's hey, listen, Tennille's been watching some New Japan Pro Wrestling, learn how to take all those neck bumps.
Style.
Flat neck, right?
Right. Ibushi.
So we get a lot of good back and forth. Everything. I mean, Jordan Grace does a spine buster at one point that was just vicious. Every time I watch Jordan Grace wrestle, Dan, I feel like I'm watching like the next great wrestler come up. She hits everything with a lot of power, really crisp. She's got great optics on what she does. Obviously, she's a beautiful person. And Big Mama Pump is certainly a upcoming favorite of mine.
Yeah, she's pretty gifted. I mean, I haven't seen a whole lot of her. I mean, I've seen like 1 or 2 matches of hers, and I think she came out was it All In? She came out in the Battle Royal I think it was up against Brian Cage. Somebody will have to fact check me on that, but I've only seen her a couple of times. But she's very strong, so she's able to do a lot of moves that a lot of women aren't able to do. Pretty impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, she stands at like 5 foot, I think, or maybe 4'11".
Yeah, she's not very tall.
Really,
she
really,
can barely
really
see
short.
over that top rope. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Tennille Dashwood, they're talking about, she's like one of the tallest competitors in the knockouts division, and I think she's like 5'6".
Yeah.
There's
not
no
a lot of size in the division.
There's no Charlotte Flairs and Nia Jax's in that, right? So I just looked.
Taya's kind of tall, isn't she?
Taya is taller. She is. I talked about this last.
I was gonna say
maybe
she's like
5'8"
or 5'9" at least.
Taya Valkyrie is 5'8". So Taya's pretty tall. I think Havoc is pretty tall. But the rest of them, we talked about 2 weeks ago. Sandy and I talked about Tasha Steelz versus Taya, and just the huge height disparity.
Yeah.
And like when she hit the road to Valhalla on Tasha Steelz, I thought she was dead. But getting back to this match between what is billed as a 5'5" versus 5'3", Tennille Dashwood versus Jordan Grace, I think both of those are wrong. But Caleb with the K gets a little bit of distraction, and then Tennille wins with her patented spotlight kick, which of course is pretty much a shiny wizard. But she hits it pretty nice, pretty clean, pretty fun match. Not it kind of sets up Tennille Dashwood here to be maybe next in line after Kylie Ray.
Right. Yeah.
So
it was a pretty good main event. Also, it's nice to see women in the main event. You don't see that a lot in some of the other shows. So it
You
was
don't,
it was
and
impressive.
it happens more often than not. It feels like an Impact. Obviously, a few weeks ago we had the Knockouts Iron Man championship bout
Right.
between Jordan Grace and Deanna Prazo, which was an incredible match. Um,
Yep.
and you have some other really good spotlight situations for them. I think they'll come close to main eventing on Bound for Glory. I think that probably is going to be Eric Young and Rich Swann, and possibly Eddie Edwards in a triple threat, depending on what happens at Victory Road. Um, they definitely they know what they have in their knockouts division. That's probably their strongest division of the three. Um,
Hmm.
their men's single division is honestly probably their weakest, and then
Yeah, I would agree.
their tag division's right up there with their knockout division. They got some really solid tag teams. We're actually going to see um, a lot of those really good tag teams in action next week. We got 4 matches that were announced for next week already. As we button up our discussion here on this week's Impact, we have the North versus Ace Austin and Madman Fulton. That should be a fun match. I love watching the North wrestle.
I
Um,
like the North. I'll tell you one
they,
thing. Was it Josh Alexander has the
yes,
headgear? I'm a
yes,
sucker for professional wrestler in headgear.
yeah, the amateur professional, right?
Right.
The old
Like
Kurt
when
Angle.
when Kurt Angle I was at that show and when he faced Edge and got his head shaved, the hair versus hair match, and then he came out the next week and had the headgear with the wig on underneath it. Oh man, all,
Yeah,
all time Kurt
yeah,
Angle moment.
it's great, right up there with just guzzling milk, right? Um, and then the other tag match, of course, we'll see the Rascals versus the Good Brothers. That
Mhm.
match has some potential to be pretty good. The Rascals are both
Yeah.
awesome. They're really good, quick in and out. I think Carl Anderson still has a bit more in the tank than Doc Gallows does. Doc
Yeah.
Gallows kind of walks around like he's got a coat hanger in his ass. But you know what? When you're that big, taking that many bumps, I don't blame him. I mean, how
Yeah.
many 6'6", 6'7" professional wrestlers do you see walking around like they got it? Matt Hardy can't walk either, right? I mean,
Right.
it affects professional wrestlers of all sides, especially if you do leg drops, which all those guys have. Um,
Right.
but that should be pretty good. We got a knockouts division tag match set up because of what happened last week. So Taya and Rosemary versus Havoc and Nevaeh. And of course the aforementioned Johnny Swinger versus Falaba for the right to be Johnny Bravo's best man.
Right. Important
Which
stipulation there.
it's super important stipulation. Falaba, of course, before this most recent run of shows, was in the tag division with TJP. TJP said he was committed to the tag division and then immediately went on a 6-week program for the X division title. So you
Typical
can't trust that
TJP.
guy. You can't trust that guy, Dan. But so, hey, man, we've made it through this week's Impact. You teased that you'd give your kind of your overall thoughts here.
Hmm.
Stepping into the world of Impact. What'd you think?
So when you told me I was going to be on the show, I told you I hadn't watched any Impact. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to start with the first night of Emergence and get caught up, right?
Yeah,
And it wasn't a struggle to watch all these shows. I was afraid going in, like, oh God, this is like homework, just
yeah,
dreading it. But no, it was like the shows went by pretty quick. Like I said earlier, I like the Wrestle House stuff. The X Division matches are pretty good. I know a lot of these wrestlers, but some of them I don't, but I'm learning about them. It's pretty good stuff. It's a nice change of pace from some of the other wrestling shows we watch.
yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I actually might stick with it. We'll see. I'll probably stick with it to Bound for Glory, and then
Yeah, see where we're at there. Yeah.
see where we're at there. If it's still clicking, then I might keep going with it. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And
So
as
thanks
always,
for introducing me to this.
no problem. Hey, man, like I said, it kind of became like a joke in our group chat, Dan. Like I was, when I first started, doing this podcast with Sandy, I was like, man, you guys should probably watch some of this. Like it's really not bad.
Yeah, you've been
And
pushing it for a long time, and we make fun of you like, oh, whatever, that's trash, that's garbage. We're watching New Japan and AEW and all this stuff, and like,
yeah,
actually, I don't know if it's on that level, but it's
no,
pretty
no, no,
good
no, no,
stuff.
no. No. It's certainly, it's obviously the primary show for this podcast, and I really enjoy it. And it's like I said before, it's an 85-minute watch. It's a different presentation than what we've been getting with the other shows, like you said.
Yep.
The matches don't last longer than 10 minutes, which is nice.
Hmm.
Like I've been going through some of these G1 matches as the New Japan G1 climax has started, And some of these matches in New Japan, they're just, they're 15 minutes just because they need to be 15 minutes because that's what they do. And they could probably stand to have, some shorter matches over there sometimes. Same thing with
Right.
AEW. But if you can give a good wrestling match in 7 to 8, 9 to 10 minutes, do
Right.
that. You don't need to make it a 15-20 minute match just because you
Right.
want to do a 15-minute match. Um,
Nope.
but yeah, no, it's a fun show. You get some good moments out of it. You get to
I tell
see.
you what, the humor in it is actually pretty good because I've been, like I said, I've been
Yeah,
watching wrestling for 40 years, and the wrestling humor is sometimes not very good at all. Right? There's
right.
occasionally something that's like the Rock's promos or Jericho or something is funny.
Yes.
Most wrestling humor sucks, right? But these
Yeah.
guys made me pop a couple of times when I was
Yeah.
watching a show.
And I
Like
really
just
like the
little shit.
commentary team too. Like we've talked about it before in this podcast. It is a husband and wife uh,
Yeah,
commentary team. Madison Rain is very quippy. She's obviously very invested.
she's better of the two.
She's the better of the two. And I think that Josh Matthews would agree with us. Um, and not just because he's married to her,
Yeah.
but she's someone that's invested in the divisions that she's calling. She's still technically in the knockouts division, kind of.
Right.
She'll jump into a match here and there. I believe she was in the Gauntlet match at Slammiversary. So Don Callis was in the booth with Josh Matthews. So there's a whole lot of good happening around Impact. They have a really good roster, lots of young talent, and of course,
Hmm.
my best friend Tommy Dreamer is there making things happen. So
Right.
I'm interested to see what the run up is to Bound for Glory, and we might have to do a socially distant mask wearing watch party for Bound for Glory for
I
the
was
Luke
thinking
Dan.
about that. Yeah.
Might be worth chipping in.
I don't. The other thing, I don't think the no crowd thing hurts them too badly. It didn't seem like when I was
No,
watching it. It
I
didn't
agree.
really take me out of it too much.
I agree.
Some of the other wrestling shows, it also doesn't, like, no crowd hasn't bothered me. And then there's some wrestling shows that they really need a crowd, right?
Yeah,
This one, it's pretty good without it.
I think
I'll have to go back and watch hopefully someday when
right.
crowds can watch wrestling again. And I think it might enhance it even more, but it's pretty good without it.
It is, and I've kind of talked about this before with Sandy, and it feels like a situation where they struggled at times to sell tickets. Right? There's
Mhm.
rumors at different times like, oh man, they're really struggling. They're literally paying people like $20 to sit there and cheer and be in, a wrestling show. So, being that there's nobody allowed to be there, close the set. Everyone set up in Nashville. I think they film a couple episodes at a time, and then they let
Mhm.
everyone else go work their indie dates. Right? Especially like their roster's been very active with Warrior Wrestling. Um, Kylie Ray has had a couple of main events.
Mhm.
On Warrior Wrestling. She's actually wrestling Madison Rain this Saturday at Warrior Wrestling. Um, so they've been really flexible about their guys getting their work still, and then setting up shop in Nashville. And like you said, I mean, it works for them.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to have a half enthusiastic crowd for your TV show, um, whereas like other promotions wouldn't have that problem, right?
Mhm.
AEW doesn't have that problem when fans are in the building. Those buildings are always loud and very
Right.
engaged. NXT is always loud and engaged at Full Sail. And so, but those shows are probably hurt more by the absence of a crowd than Impact in contrast.
Right.
But hey, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how they continue to shape up here for Bound for Glory. We've got two championship matches, possibly an undercard match with Brian Myers and Tommy Dreamer. Fingers crossed. As the president of the Dreamer Club, I feel like I should get a cut every time he gets a pay-per-view booking,
Right.
because I'm putting him over on this podcast a lot, Dan, as you know. But, before we start talking about video games here, I do gotta say, I mean, you think about it, Batman, right? Robin especially. Robin's wearing some trunks, but with no tights.
Right.
And you know what? It's just like the same thing with when it's swimsuit season, right? And you put on your Speedo, you got to clean up down there. You can't have
Yeah.
stragglers hanging out of your trunks. So what I'm sure Dick Grayson does is he goes over to manscaped.com. He punches in the promo code SUPLEX, and he saves 20% off of his entire order, gets free shipping on the Lawnmower 3.0 from Manscaped, which, of course, is the best in men's below the belt grooming. What he really likes about this, and this is true, I talked to Dick Grayson on the phone the other week. I went to grade school with Dick Grayson. I gave him
Yeah.
a call, and I said, listen, this third generation trimmer from Manscaped, the Lawnmower 3.0, it has a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce manscaping accidents. Millions of balls, this is true, Dick. Millions of balls are about to be nick free thanks to Manscaped's advanced skin safe technology. And of course, he uses promo code SUPLEX. He saves some money, although I'm sure money probably isn't an option. But billionaires, they're always trying to save a buck.
He's just a ward, man. He doesn't have the money Bruce does.
I'm sure Bruce is probably
Bruce is probably pretty tight with those purse strings.
Yeah, probably. But if it's like, hey, listen, I gotta look good for the ladies when I'm jumping over these rooftops here. Batman's like, hey, I totally get it. Catwoman, she prefers me to be a little bit trimmed up too.
Well, Robin should say, look, Batman, Bruce, you put me in this outfit, these tight trunks, and no tights or anything. It's like, you gave this to me. You should at least give me the ability to clean up my stuff down there, right? You don't want me. You don't want the monkey swinging down there, right? I got to be slim and trim if I'm going to be doing some backflips and kicking Two-Face in the head. So
yeah, listen, when these panels come across, you don't want to see any little curlies hanging out. So
that's right.
So Batman, of course, agreed, said, okay, fine, I'll pay for it, but you got to use the promo code SUPLEX. You get 20% off of your order and free shipping, which I am told Manscaped would ship to the Batcave. So that to say, we are now going to get. Yeah, right. Probably the first and last time they'll ever have a Manscaped promo like that. We'll put that one on the reel that we send to Manscaped, Dan, to prove that we did the ad spot. But I will say this: when we went to the All Out pay-per-view, I did use Crop Preserver, and I've talked about it the past couple of weeks here. I did use Crop Preserver, and normally after a hot summer day, walking around, standing in line, driving, I'd be Mr. Waddles by the end of the night because of some serious chafing action. And thanks to using Crop Preserver at the All Out pay-per-view, I was fine. So definitely use your promo code SUPLEX over at manscaped.com. Manscaped would like to remind you also to trim that junk of yours. I always like to use that tagline, Dan. That's kind of like my go-to one. It's the one I'm most comfortable saying for some reason.
Love that junk.
Yeah, shout out to my nephew, Arthur, who listens to this podcast occasionally. You can skip that part, bud. So, anyways, we want to get into it. We talked about it before on the lead up here. Dan we had put out a thing on Twitter like, hey, give us an idea for what game stuff you want to hear about. And this was right after the announcement of the Gotham Knights game and Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, which we'll get into a little bit later. But Dan had reached out and said, hey, listen, man, you guys should talk about Batman games and, especially like the Arkham ones. And I said, okay, cool. Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely do that. And then, one thing leads to another. Sandy shows up on the Raw Underground. I need a co-host.
Sandy big times you.
Listen, she's got bigger and better things to do than this podcast. No, I'm kidding, of course. She's very sad that she's missed recording these past 2 weeks, but she's happy to listen to the show with both you and Rich on it. So she's excited, obviously, to get the opportunity to be working with WWE as an extra.
No slight against her. I mean, she needs to go take care of herself.
I told her, hey, listen, get yourself booked, all right? Go work a match. So hey, fingers crossed. Hey, maybe if they have some injuries, I heard some things happened this week on NXT. So if they need some extra bodies, now they know they got one. So fingers crossed for Sandy, of course. But when Sandy let me know that she was going to be doing that stuff, I said, okay, hey, Dan, how about that Batman stuff you said that we should talk about? Why don't you come talk about it? And so, we'll just kind of give a brief thing. I know you're a big Batman fan.
Right.
You got some Batman stuff on the wall behind you for the listeners at home. You're wearing a Batman sweatshirt.
I
Um,
actually just grabbed this randomly today and then realized, oh, the perfect day to wear it.
right, exactly. So, it's one of those things. Batman obviously has been a part of our pop culture landscape since, the 30s and 40s.
I think like
Um,
1939 is when it came out in
yeah,
Detective
right.
Comics.
There you go, right? So
38, 39, somewhere around in there, yeah.
yeah, so for the past 80 years, right, we've had Batman, and we have had good Batman. We've had some, tough stuff to watch and read Batman.
Yeah.
We've had excellent animated series. We've had excellent video game series, although that's more recent. And Batman. My experience with Batman, and we'll get into yours. The first time I really remember vividly watching Batman was the Batman animated series that was on in the early 90s. And it
Hmm.
was the kind of thing now as an adult, as a father myself, I look back and I say, man, why the fuck did my parents let me watch that? Because it's pretty dark at points. And
Yeah, it's got some adult themes in it for an
it
afternoon
does.
TV cartoon, yeah.
There's death all over the place in it.
Oh, yeah.
And what's funny is there's obviously the different animated movies that came out as well that were the direct to video ones that were also very good. Used all the same cast, Kevin Conroy as Batman, Mark Hamill as the Joker, and Mask of the Phantasm. I vividly remembered as a child having nightmares and never being able to watch it again because of when I watched it. I was like 7, 8 years old. There's a scene where the Phantasm pushes a gravestone and buries a gangster in his grave. And
Pretty
like
dark.
dude, right? Um, and so from that point on, like this is 100% true. Up until a month ago, I refused to watch Mask of the Phantasm again. And now I'm proud to say that at 30 years old,
Traumatized.
I braved watching Mask of the Phantasm again on HBO Max.
Right.
And now I'm like, oh, okay, that wasn't that bad, because
Big steps.
because
Good
because
job.
I'm not 8 years old anymore. Um,
Right.
but certainly at the time, I mean, but Batman he was always the dark, the brooding kind of, you
Well,
didn't
that's
know
Batman's whole thing is fear, right? I mean, the whole Batman
exactly.
character is based on fear. So it's pretty
Yeah,
amazing that this character for 80 years, based on fear and scaring people and darkness, has
yeah.
been as popular as he is, right?
Well, and
Especially with kids.
of course, too, I think a lot of that, the reason why we kind of pushed through that darkness being the controller, and why Batman pushed through the 60s and 70s, of course, was because of uh, the 1960s Batman series starring
Right.
uh, Mr. West.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've had Batman be very goofy. We've had Batman be very serious. We've had Batman be um, laugh out loud funny in the wrong ways. Like for instance when Ben Affleck plays him. Um, but
Shots fired.
yeah, right. But what's kind of like your first vivid memory of locking eyes on the Cape Crusader and just kind of being like, man, I'm about this.
So, kind of like wrestling, I don't remember the first time I saw Batman. He's just like always been a part of my life, right? I was born in 77, and that was after the TV show, obviously. But even when I was a little kid, we'd go to the grocery store or the drugstore or whatever, and occasionally my mom would buy me Batman comics.
Sure.
So, and he really wasn't the cultural phenomenon then that he is now. A lot
Hmm.
of that has to do with the '89 Tim Burton Batman.
Yep. Yep.
I still remember that vividly. That summer when that came out, like you could not escape Batman. It
Sure.
was like, I mean, it was a real first true huge blockbuster like that since like Star Wars, right? It's like everything was Batman. Everything was like Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. Like Spencer Gifts was just like the Batman store, right?
Sure.
I remember even in my small town when that movie came out, it was like people were waiting outside to get in this small
Wow.
podunk town in Indiana. I remember I was there the first night, and I was overwhelmed, like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever. And ever since then, it's like Batman has been more like the cultural touchstone that he is.
Sure.
But yeah, that summer when I was like 12 years old, I mean, that was right in the sweet spot of the perfect age for that too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so ever since then, it's just like been ingrained in me. And then of course the animated series followed just a couple of years after that, and of course it was excellent. Like
Yeah.
the Michael Keaton Batman movies were okay. They were
Right.
more like Tim Burton movies than like the traditional Batman. They did go into
Right.
like the gothicness of Gotham City and stuff like that, but they also had like Vicky Vale and all this other weird crap that wasn't really in the comics, so it was kind of odd. But the animated series was like the comics, and it was like traditional Batman, basic Batman. It was
Yeah.
great. I mean, I was sort of getting older at that time when it was coming out, so I didn't really watch it all like every day or anything, but even at like 14, 15, 16, I was still like, oh, this is pretty good. I'm going to watch this, right?
Yeah, and there's some really, like you mentioned earlier, some really adult thinking on adult situations that come up
Mm-hmm.
through that show, and there's stuff that watching. I watched a few episodes back, and I was just like, okay, like yeah, I could see why my parents maybe let this slide because I wouldn't have understood some of the stuff that they were saying, that they were
Right.
talking about, or these situations because I mean that show came out. I want to say like 93, 94. So if it puts it
Right.
more 94, that puts me like 4 years old, right? So I was born in 1990. So I missed that whole summer of '89, Batman swing by not being alive. But uh, like right being like 4 or 5 to start watch that show, I just thought it was cool, right?
Yeah.
Growing up, my brother had Batman pajamas and I was in Robin pajamas, right? I mean, Batman was always a part of my childhood because this was all post that renaissance of the Tim Burton
Right.
stuff. And of course, we wind up getting things like, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin and just absolute, just,
Schumacher years. Yeah. I remember those vividly.
yeah, right. I mean, yeah, how can you not remember Arnold Schwarzenegger delivering
Right.
cold puns as Dr. Freeze? But
Right.
they made tons of money and they kept making
Yeah.
them. And I remembered having McDonald's, and I don't know if you remember this, when McDonald's used to do commemorative glasses and mugs
Of
for the
course.
different movies that came out, and I had the complete set of the Batman mugs.
I
Um,
loved them.
those were awesome. And
Yeah.
every night with dinner, I'd have my milk on the rocks in my Batman mug. As we were eating, whatever spaghetti and knowing my mom, it was there's a 50-50 chance that it was spaghetti and red sauce. Of course, ragu from the jar. But that's that was my childhood in a nutshell. Was watching cartoons, drinking my milk out of my Batman mug, or
There you go.
My Disney commemorative cups also that McDonald's had at the time. But yeah, I mean, when we talk about video games specifically, because we are the 8-bit suplex,
Right.
it's always appropriate in my mind when we have the ability to start the conversation somewhere with a long-standing video game series or a character that spans multiple decades of video games to start with the 8-bit era. And so right at the time that Batman comes out in theaters in 1989 is the sweet spot of every movie that came out was getting licensed as a video game. It just
Mm-hmm.
was, right? So of course they call the game Batman, or they call the movie Batman the movie, and so the game, of course, is Batman the game. Um, and it comes out in 1989 on the Nintendo Entertainment System. There was stuff before. It was uh, Commodore 64 stuff and things. I'm not very familiar with a lot of the older stuff. Like just because Commodore 64s, by the time I was a kid, I don't know that there was any that were still working. You know, they didn't last very long.
Yeah.
But Sunsoft was a company that made a lot of these licensed games. If you ever watched the Angry Video Game Nerd series, you know about LJN. LJN did a lot of licenses for movie video games.
Yeah.
Like Jaws, for an example. Um,
Yep.
so thankfully, Sunsoft was the one that made Batman the video game. Now this game, I've played it a good amount, on through emulation. I never had the cartridge or anything. It wasn't one that my dad and my brother had, by the time I came around. My brother's a few years older than me, so he was kind of responsible for the video game collecting early in my childhood until eventually he was too cool for them, and then I took over kind of amassing our collection. But Batman, the video game, I didn't get to play until much later in life. It's a really challenging side-scrolling platformer game, kind of Ninja Gaiden-esque. Um,
Right.
it doesn't necessarily tap into the Batman of the times per se and how the gameplay was, but overall, it's not a bad game. I don't know what about were you starting to get into kind of Batman games? Like, what was probably the first one you played?
So the first game I played with Batman in it wasn't even a Batman game. So I don't know if you remember, but Revenge of Shinobi for the Sega Genesis, right?
Absolutely,
Came out
yeah.
in 1989. Now, did you play that game at all?
Yes, so I actually played the entire Shinobi trilogy on the Genesis.
Okay.
I didn't play them necessarily when they came out, but I have since played. I played a lot of Shinobi, absolutely.
So Revenge of Shinobi, there was a pretty big controversy when it came out because they just used random like popular characters in the game without like getting a license or anything, right? Batman
Right,
was one of them. Batman was one of the bosses in the game. It was
right.
like you're playing. I think it's like a construction yard or something, and you're going to. And first you fight Spider-Man, and it's not like some games you'll see where they like make it look like it's Spider-Man, quote unquote.
Right, and
No,
then they'll
this was
call him Man
Spider-Man.
Spider. They'll call him Man Spider.
Yeah, no, this was Spider-Man, and he came out and he had the Spider-Man outfit and he was shooting webs at you and stuff. And then you fought him for a while, and then he crawled up into the ceiling, and then Batman came down. It was a regular old Batman, and he's like, but the weird thing was he was flying around. It was like he's using his cape as wings, and like real bats came out. But that was my first experience with Batman. I mean, they also had Rambo in this game,
Wow.
Godzilla,
Yeah,
Terminator. It was like, and so they had lawsuits out the wazoo, and then they eventually had to change all that stuff. So eventually, Batman, I think in the game, in the later versions, they turned him into some kind of Japanese demon man character. But even
I
that
think
one was
that's
like a
correct.
Japanese
Yeah,
licensed character, which,
yeah.
6 of one, half dozen of the other. So you're going to get sued again, guys. What are you doing here?
Right,
Um,
exactly.
but that was the first time I ever saw Batman in a game. And then I didn't have, when I was a kid, I didn't have an NES. I had a Sega Master System, right?
Okay,
So they didn't have a
sure.
lot of licensed games for that. So I never really got to play the
Yeah,
NES Batman games. I noticed a lot of them were similar back at that time. Like they were pretty much all Ninja Gaiden, side-scrolling,
yeah.
run around,
The
shoot
side scroll
clowns with your
platformer.
batarangs stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So the follow up to that game, of course, is Batman: Return of the Joker. Very much in that came out in 1991. Sunsoft made that one as well. So they kept to the same tried and true platforming, shooting your batarangs, and uh, painfully hard. Um, Most people, I think, would struggle to beat it, um, regardless of their ability to play games or their age or anything. But certainly, when I was getting my hands on them as a older single digit, lower teen, playing through some of the older games, it was very difficult. Now, the one that I most vividly remember as a kid, there's two, and they came out in back-to-back years. One was 1994's The Adventures of Batman and Robin, which of course was based on the animated series
Hmm.
game. And then the follow-up to that, which was a tie-in to the movie license for Batman Forever, was the game Batman Forever. Um, Talking first about The Adventures of Batman and Robin, it's your side-scroller beat 'em up. It's really a lot of fun, especially when you play two-player. You got Batman and Robin going through. Really cool. Graphically was awesome. It made a lot of sense um, with the color schemes. There's a 16-bit with the Super Nintendo. It was also on the Genesis. It looked really well. The frame rate stayed when there was multiple enemies, so you didn't have any problems with a lot of beat 'em ups where like things were just
Right.
yeah,
Start
they'd
flashing
go
in and out.
right
Yeah.
exactly. You get that Contra flash in, flash out, right?
Hmm.
Don't have that problem with this game. I really enjoy this one. Now I know you said you had the Sega Master System. Did you ever have a Genesis
Yeah, I
or Super
upgraded to
Nintendo?
the Genesis. That's
Did
when
you?
I
Okay.
played the Revenge of Shinobi. That was one of the, I think it was
Okay.
like the
Sure.
first or second game I bought, after it came with Sonic, and then I think
Sure.
I was like, oh, I'm getting this ninja game right here.
They're right because and for the listeners that were not around in the early '90s, if you could put the word ninja on anything,
Oh
it
yeah,
would
it's sold
sell.
instantly.
It sold like a million copies automatic.
hmm
But so I don't know. Did you ever play this one?
I didn't play this one either. No, I might have rented it from the store. But man, I'm
Yeah.
old. This was
Uh,
25, 30 years ago.
yeah. Right.
I played a lot of games back then.
For my nephew and for the younger listeners, renting a video game, you used to be able to go to a store
Yeah,
and
let's explain that to kids.
you'd pay them $5 or $8. It eventually got pretty expensive, and they'd give you a game for 3 days,
A
and then
cartridge.
a cartridge, a physical cartridge that you could put in your system at home, and then when you were done with it, you'd have to bring it back within 3 days or get charged an additional $5
Yeah.
for being a day late. And listen, you didn't want to be a day late on anything. But if you had my dad, you were constantly late with your rentals, and it didn't matter because I wasn't paying for it, so I didn't really care. Um, but the follow up to this one was 1995's Batman Forever. I only mentioned this one. It is a terrible game, but I only mentioned this one because it really tried to latch on to the concept um of the motion capture that was used in Mortal Kombat. So
Mm.
you had these digitized motion cap, real people doing, sweep kicks and Liu Kang's rabbit punches, and yeah, it was a
It's like a
mess.
video game where you play as a GIF, basically, right?
It pretty much is what it is, right? You see the moves on a loop, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of random shit like to like drop down because there's multiple levels of platforms. To drop down, you would have to push like up and R. Why on earth
Uh,
would you push up and R to drop down a platform, right? It was just
no.
it was a completely unplayable game. There was a Dracula game that was really similar to that. I don't know if you ever played that one. If I could draw that comparison, but back when what was it? It was that a Keanu Reeves movie with Dracula back in the early '90s.
Yeah. Bram Stoker's
Bram
Dracula.
Stoker's
Yeah, yeah.
Dracula. So the
Francis Ford Coppola. Yeah.
Yeah, so the video game adaptation of that used the same kind of motion capture platforms and other nonsense.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't even realize that movie had a game.
It probably should not have. But like we said,
One of
this
those
was
wonderful licenses, right?
this is the time, like, man, this is and still to this day, a lot of movies get video game licenses. I will say, and I don't know if you've noticed this, that seems to have dropped off pretty substantially since the PS4, Xbox One era.
Mm,
But even I remember, like on the GameCube, like the animated movie Open Season had a game.
right.
Like
I think I vaguely remember seeing that when I worked at the video store. Yeah.
yeah, like Over the Hedge had a video game. Those were not titles that were going to sell, but they were cheap
Right.
enough licenses that they could put a familiar face to maybe boost up this kids
Yeah.
based platformer they wanted to sell.
Some aunt that doesn't know anything will buy it for their nephew or something.
Tell me
Yep.
about it. Yeah, yeah, I definitely received a few of those.
Right.
But it wasn't like I said. So far, Batman was pretty good as far as video games goes up to this point. Yeah, there were some clankers, there were some unplayable ones. I will say, never play a Batman game on the Game Boy. It's just don't do it. None of them were good. They had ported Return of the Joker to the Game Boy, and it is an unbelievably unplayable game.
Hmm.
Um, because as you can imagine, platforming with projectiles on a very small green drop
Yeah.
background screen with the Game Boy, not very good. Game Boy was great for a lot of things. I loved my Game Boy. It took a beating. I literally rolled off my parents' car probably 6 times, and I think at the end, all that ever happened to it was it lost the audio. But
Wow.
yeah, dude, they built those things pretty tough back then. Um,
Bricks.
yeah, literally. I think I could have stopped a home intruder with it. Um, but Game Boy will be a topic I'm sure that we cover at some point in length here. But when we do cover that, I won't be talking about games like Batman Return of the Rest of the Joker, right? So, but Batman had some hits and misses. Nothing really got him over the hump in the video game world, really until we get to about 2008 and we see the Lego Batman video game.
Yeah.
When the Lego series really started to ramp up. You have kids.
hmm
I have kids. But I was also, I was 18 at the time Lego Batman came out, right around the time that all these Lego games are really getting popular. Uh, were these anything that you ever got really involved in playing a
Actually,
whole
I
lot of?
I did play the Lego Batman. I played the first one.
Sure.
I have the other two on Steam, and I haven't really had a chance to play them. But the first one, me and my son did play. I mean, when it came out in 2008, he was about, I think he was 8 or 9 years old,
Perfect
and
age for it. Sweet spot. Yeah.
yeah, and I was, I just turned 30. Um, so those are the perfect games to play with your son because it's
Yes.
a two-player game. It's really not that complicated. The characters are cute and funny, and as an adult, I still think it's not, I don't always want to play something super complicated. Sometimes I just
Right.
want to go
Shut your
around
brain
and
off.
some punch some boxes and turn them into bricks and build it up and
Right.
stuff. So yeah, they're
Exactly.
actually, that was the best part about the Lego Batman games too, is they use the license for something different. Every other game, like pretty much before that, was just, like we talked about, it's side scroller, you run and you shoot batarangs at bad guys, right? This one
Right.
actually, I mean, you do that too, but it's more in the Lego mold where you're
Right.
doing other things and it's cute and it's fun. So
Well,
it's a nice change
you're
of
doing some
pace.
puzzles. You're doing some,
Right.
I played the Lego games some back then. I didn't have as much disposable income, so when a game would come out, I would lean more towards like the AAA releases, your Halos of the world, if you will. Um,
Right.
but the Lego games, my son and I, he's 4. So he kind of, there's some of the puzzles he can't really figure out sometimes, but he can play the game basically, right?
Right.
We play like Lego Jurassic World.
hmm
We just got Lego DC Supervillains
There you go.
that we've been playing through that one. But yeah, I mean, once we hit Lego Batman here, we kind of start this trend upwards for Batman video games.
Yeah.
Immediately following that, they had some, like I think Batman Vengeance or something or other came out right after that. That wasn't very good. But 2009, we see Arkham Asylum come out.
Right.
And what was going on in video games was at the time really was a lot of people trying to figure out how do we innovate combat. We can have more enemies on the screen. We can have more textures. We're hitting that PS3, Xbox 360 era here with this release. Um, and at the time, games like Assassin's Creed
Right.
were very popular. I believe Prince of Persia: Sands of Time was right just before this.
hmm
Um, so you have this one-to-many combat system that's being worked out by a couple of different developers at the time, setting up these combo counter mechanics, right? And they said, "Hey, we can take that and we can put it in a Batman game." Oh, and also that other really popular series of games that's out right now, all those stealth ones, we're gonna mix that in too because it's also Batman.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know about you, but the first time I played Arkham Asylum, I was completely blown away.
Oh yeah, definitely. So when it came out, I that was another point in my life where I was taken over by other things like work and kids and all this other stuff. So I didn't really get to play video games that much. And but I'd seen it come out and I was like, oh yeah, it's another Batman game. That's cool. Um, so I didn't even really play it until they came out with the Game of the Year edition, right? And then I was like, well, maybe I should play this because it sounds pretty good. And yeah, first time I loaded it up and started playing, I was like, "Oh my God, why did I wait so long to play this? This is incredible! Like this
Yeah,
is like it's like movie quality voice acting. It's like incredible graphics. Yeah, I was just completely blown away by it. And like you said, it's not just the run and punch thing, right? You do
right,
have the combat, which apparently they base the combat in these games on a dance game because it's all rhythm, like when you're punching and flipping
right,
around and stuff like that. That's incredible to me. But then also in these games, you do get to play the world's greatest detective, right? You never really got
right.
to do that in games before, which that was one of the things I always loved about Batman. It's not that he runs around punching people. It's like he has to figure out these crimes, right? And figure out what happened, where it happened. And these are the first games that really allowed you to step into that mode in Batman.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And like you said, the voice acting, of course, we have Kevin Conroy and Mark
Right.
Hamill reprising their roles from the animated series. And
Perfect.
listen,
Iconic roles. Yeah.
they are fantastic. And there's been plenty of other people that do good Joker voices. John DiMaggio does a great one in Under the Red Hood. But listen, as far as Joker's concerned, there's only one Joker in my mind, and it always will be Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
He's the iconic voice of the Prince of Crime. I mean, so yeah, so to have those guys come back and agree to do it and be like, okay, fine, yeah, we'll do it. I think that really it got Batman fans on board, right?
Right.
You were gonna get
It showed they were taking it seriously, not
very
just like
much so,
pumping it out as a licensed game. Like this is going to
very
be
much
like a
so.
real game.
Exactly, and you get to see a lot of really different characters kind of show up here. Clayface, Ra's al Ghul. Really, you're just like, oh, okay, like we're taking this
Well, those two
kind of,
didn't even show up until the next one, right? So
I think
Batman has
Clayface is in it briefly in the first one,
it's
very
not very
briefly.
long if he's in it.
No,
He
but I
plays
think
more of a role in the second.
right. So you got all kinds of people that are you get references to different ones too that
That
aren't
was the
in the
big part of it. It's like they have a set of
universe.
of
Yeah,
of villains from his rogues gallery. He's got so many that they couldn't fit them all in one game, right? So they
no,
had like
never.
Scarecrow and Joker and Killer Croc and a few of these other guys in there. But then they were also had all those little Riddler clues that talked about all these other
Right.
villains in
Other
the game.
villains, yeah.
And at the same time they were working on this first one, they'd started working on the second one, and they incorporated all those ones they couldn't fit into the first one into the second one, and just flowed right into it.
Right.
It's just
And I don't know about
incredible.
you, but I hated that Killer Croc level.
Yeah.
Any, anything that has those jump out kind of moments, I just want to be
Yeah.
done with them as quickly as possible.
My problem with it too was I was never good at that quick batarang thing where you got to pull the trigger real quick.
Right.
Like I was always missing it, so Croc was always taking me under. Plus, part of that level too, you have to have patience and like walk real slowly. I don't like doing that in games. Like
Right.
listen, I have a limited number of minutes on this earth. I don't want to spend it walking around in the sewers under Arkham Asylum, right?
Right.
I want to get the whatever polyps or whatever I had to go get there in Killer Croc's base and go, come on.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, it was awesome. It was certainly groundbreaking. It was, the hits felt real. They had a really good engine. I think they used Unreal Engine for this game, really showing what the different punches and kicks were really impacting these guys. And
crunches. The sounds on it.
You hear
really
the bones breaking, and you see when you do the X-ray vision, you can see the bones kind of snap. Really cool stuff. Everyone loved the game. I mean, it was 9s and 10s across the board from all the publications.
Right.
And then, like you said, they had the follow-up Batman Arkham City happening. Before we get into that, I will say at the same time that Arkham City was being released in 2011, DC Universe Online also came online. And this was during the real hot time for MMOs or massively multiplayer online games. This is your World of Warcraft era. This is everyone was trying to get you to get a game and pay a monthly fee for it, and just grind and grind and grind and grind. And Dan, I think you probably played DC Universe Online more than I did. But the amount that I played, I actually really enjoyed kind of being able to kind of create my own super character here and interact with, the Justice League.
Yeah. So in this game, like you don't get to be Batman or Superman, or you can actually play villains in the game too. You don't get to be those guys. Those guys are like your mentors, but you get to create, like you said, you get to create your own character. You can put your own outfit. You can get a cape if you want. You get to pick if you want to be a damage dealer or a tank, like a typical MMO stuff. I always pretty much played as a villain.
Sure.
I always lean that way when I play the games because I'm not like that in real life. So it allows me to live vicariously through my terrible character.
Right. Gives you an outlet.
But yeah, that game, I think I played it for like a year or two. As another game, my son played too. He made his character. We enjoyed it quite a bit. We we weren't like we didn't have like a guild or anything like they have with World of Warcraft. We just jump on and
Sure.
play, and it wasn't really that really in-depth combat system or anything. It was just
Right.
like, mostly it was just like punch and throw a spell or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Use your X-ray vision or
right,
cold breath, whatever the case may be.
right. But it
Yeah.
was still pretty fun. I mean, you still got to go into Gotham City and Metropolis
Yeah.
and some of the other places and fight some of the villains or some of the heroes, depending on which side you went. And there's some story to it. It kind of got burned out after a while. They weren't updating it as quick as the end game kind of ran out. But while you
Yeah.
were built, I think when I played, I don't know what it is now because it's still going on. When I played, the max cap on the level was 30, right? And grinding up to
Yeah.
30 was pretty fun. You went on some quests and did some stuff, but once you hit 30, it was just kind of like, what
Yeah.
do I do now?
Right. Start a new character. Yeah. I think I think when I played it, because when I played it after I went free to play, which is what
Mm-hmm.
it is currently now. So yeah, I feel for those that played it when it wasn't free to play.
Yeah.
But I think I want to say the cap is 60 when I was playing it.
Okay.
But I could be mixing my memories of that with my memories of playing World of Warcraft. Like early World of Warcraft, I think had a level cap of 60.
It did
Um,
too. Yeah.
so I played World of Warcraft very briefly. I wasn't super into MMOs, but like I said, when DC Universe Online went free to play, I did play that quite a bit because I was like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a shot now. I mean, there's no, I'm
Yeah.
not investing anything. And I played some different characters, tried out some different things. I had a character that could fly. I had a character that could run real fast. It was fun. It was a nice change of pace from the normal superhero beat the piss out of everything
Yeah.
and win, right?
I
So
probably would have played it more if we had like two PlayStations or something, and my son and I could play at the same time, and we could go take on, go into the instances or whatever together. But
right,
it's like I had to play it, or he had to play it, and so like, and I didn't know anybody else that played it, and
yeah,
I'm not really big on meeting randos on the internet and playing with them. So
yeah. I'm both the same way. I still prefer couch co-op. That's kind
yeah,
of my preferred method of gameplay. Even when my wife and I had first started dating, I tried to get her to play Halo with me on the couch, and she definitely pointed her gun at her feet the entire time. So my wife she's very good at the old school games that are D-pads and buttons,
hmm
but the dual joysticks throws her for a loop.
threw her
She
off,
does
huh? Yeah,
throws her for a loop, but we love her anyways, and not just because she every time we go on a wrestling road trip she bakes us delicious cookies. Um,
definitely.
but same year that we see DC Universe Online come out, we see the follow-up to Arkham Asylum, which this is my personal favorite of the series in
Yeah,
Batman
I
Arkham
agree.
City.
Yeah,
Um, it took all the things that were great about Arkham Asylum and then just magnified it times 10, right? I mean,
yeah.
it was awesome.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The story itself was a little convoluted, but most of these games, there's 8 million switches
Right.
and backstabbings and all this stuff, and it's really hard to keep track. Mostly you're wanting to run around and punch bad guys and do detective work and stuff like that. But yeah, this game, I mean, Arkham Asylum the island itself was pretty big, but Arkham City was huge.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, it just blew it away, and that game was 9s and 10s across the board. So this is like one of the greatest all time games.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I could point to any one reason why it's that much better than Asylum. But I liken it to. I mean, at the same time that we're getting these games, we're getting the Nolan Batman trilogy, right?
hmm
So what you see with Batman Begins is they set the groundwork for everything that we're going to see in the Nolan universe. Then you get to the Dark Knight, and they take everything that was good about Batman Begins. They get rid of Katie Holmes, which was a decision I disagreed with. But they take that movie and they completely blow up the scope of what's happened in Batman Begins, and now we have, obviously Heath Ledger's performance as Joker. It takes everything over the top. I don't know that there's one thing I could point to and say, well, that's why The Dark Knight's a better movie from a mechanical perspective, from a production perspective. And I think the same can be said of this game, is that you take Arkham City, and it's a much bigger, much more involved. There's so much more to do. It's everything that was right about the first game expanded, and then just finer tuned, tweaked, right? And it came out with the exception of the end plot, which I don't know how you feel about spoiling 10-year-old games, but the fact that Joker is legitimately dying of an illness. And then you just kind of, that's the end of it, right? Okay, Joker's dead at the end of the game. And it just, it's kind of, like you said, the plot's hit or miss. But the game as a whole, from a discovery and gameplay and combat and secret stuff with the Riddler clues again, I mean, I really enjoyed it quite. It's the best
Well, it
Batman
just seemed
game
like
I think I've played.
it was the first game evolved, right? Like the combat system is very similar, but it gives you more moves and more options when you're fighting. The first game, you just have kind of like a punch, and you can do your cape to like make the guy with the knife stop or whatever, right? But in the second one, you have much more different abilities. It introduces the Catwoman levels, right? So now you can play as another character, right? Which I don't really think they might have had some DLC for the first one where you could do that, but I think it was just in the combat zones. I don't think you could actually do anything in the game. No,
I don't.
Right?
I think it was just the combat zones. I think that's correct.
Right, but in Arkham City, you can actually play as another character, which I like the Catwoman level. She had her own little thing, and much more with the Riddler. The story itself, like you said, is long, convoluted, and the ending is kind of surprising. Like I was shocked that they actually went through with what they did, but it pays off in the later game too. So
I mean, it was shocking because we knew that they were making more of these, right? There was no chance that Rocksteady was going to stop at 2 games. It just wasn't going to happen.
Especially not with the success they were having, right?
Right, Critical and
WB's going to get in the studio, make another one now. Right, exactly. I don't
care. and what's interesting though, and it's funny that you mentioned WB because that's where we're going next, is that this Arkham series had more than one developer work on it. We get Arkham Origins, which was produced by WB Montreal, which is their game studio that WB owns. Arkham Origins falls kind of flat. And I don't think it's the game studio's fault. I don't think it's I don't want to talk poorly of the people that made the game. It just didn't capture that same gusto that the first 2 did.
So I like this game, right? Because I like the first 2. This is a couple of things about it though. It didn't really like the first city expanded quite a bit on the first one. The only thing Arkham Origins really expanded was the size of the city. It was still more spread out, and you had to. I think if I remember right, you had to take the Batwing to get from one place to the other, right? You had fast travel finally. But it was, on the one hand, it's more the same, but then again, on the other hand, it's more the same. Like I love the first 2 games, so it's more of that too. Two things that really stood out for me in this game, actually. The third one's kind of not really related to the game itself, but the first thing is the boss battles are pretty memorable to me more than the first couple of games.
Okay.
Like when you're fighting Deathstroke, I still think about that fight because you're doing he's like hitting you with the swords and you're like throwing up your hand and you got to time it just right. I really struggled with that, so I was pretty proud of myself when I beat it.
I understand. Right? Yeah.
The other thing in it is it also expanded on the detective work. Like you had to go in and like examine gun shrapnel and all kinds of stuff like that in a few of the rooms. I wish they would have expanded on that more in there. And then the third thing, I guess because it's from the different studio, like the other games, all the other 3 games are on the next gen. Well, at the time they were the next gen platforms, Xbox One and PS4, right? They made their greatest hits or whatever.
Yeah.
This one's not available on there. You have to go search out to find. It's not even on their store, right? At least with the Xbox version. I don't think it's on the PlayStation store because I don't have PlayStation.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But you have to go get the disc and play it, which I think we sold ours to GameStop or something. But since we've been talking about doing this show, I'm probably going to go pick it up and play it again just because I remember liking it so much. But that kind of, I find that very odd that, especially with the new game they've just announced coming out, they didn't have it out when Arkham Knight was out. I was like, why wouldn't you just throw it out there? How much could it cost to just because if it's already backwards compatible, right? Just put it on the game store, right? Sell it for $10 or $15. I don't understand the logic in that.
Yeah,
make your stuff available. Impact Wrestling, make your stuff available, right?
Yeah,
WB Montreal, make your stuff available.
I don't know how much of that is a product of the game studio not doing that versus Microsoft. I mean, I would assume that Microsoft wouldn't care because both Microsoft and Sony make 30% off of every digital sale on their stores.
Right.
Which is stupid money. So, I can't imagine that they would be opposed to that. And it maybe just be, WB Montreal is not really operating much anymore. So, I mean, it could be a factor of that.
Yeah. It's just weird to me that it's hard to find when it's supposed to be part of the series, but it's technically not part of the series. Yeah, I know.
It's the quote unquote origin story of the Arkham series. And what's interesting too is that you don't have Kevin Conroy or Mark Hamill in it.
That too. I didn't really miss them that much in this game. I mean, the voice acting sounds pretty good. I mean, they mimicked Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill pretty well. Yeah, you can tell it's not them, but it's also really good impressions.
If I'm not mistaken, Troy Baker, who does Joker for that game, I think Troy has done Joker also for different animated releases and things because Mark Hamill doesn't do it anymore. He came back and did The Killing Joke, I want to say, when they adapted that a couple years ago. But for the most part, Mark Hamill's been done because I mean, at his age, the strain to do the Joker at this point has got to be just unreal, right? I've done a little bit of research into how much voice actors have to do, and what especially for games. You think about if you're recording an animated show or an animated movie, your script might be maybe 100 pages, and maybe you talk on 20 of those pages. From what I understand, when you do a video game, they hand you what is a double-sized college textbook,
right?
Especially if you're the playable character, you have to do all the and you have to do the laughing, the victories, the defeats, the this, the that, every single noise, the breathing. Okay, can you do a breath like you're struggling, and okay, how about a deep breath that you just surprised that you got through that. And you record all these different sounds that you don't think about how much time goes into that voice acting. Right. So I can appreciate when those guys take the opportunity to say, "Whoa, man, okay, it's an origin story, so maybe you want younger voices, right?" Right. Oh yeah, Kevin Conroy at the time was he's pretty old, and he was pretty old when these games were being made too. So they went with a different Batman, and then when Mark found that out, he's like, okay, well, have somebody else do the Joker for this one, and then of course, I believe they both came back for Arkham Knight, if I'm not mistaken.
They did. Yeah.
To put a kind of bow on that, but yeah, Origins, it was certainly not a bad game. It just didn't do as much for me as Arkham City did. Right. And then Arkham Knight,
polarizing.
For me, it had a lot of similar, and these games to me mirror the Nolan trilogy quite a bit. It's not a bad game, but it just feels like trying to we know this is the last one we're doing, so let's jam everything into it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how kind of the Dark Knight felt, or not the Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises. Felt with the Nolan trilogy, right? Oh, let's do Catwoman. Oh, let's do Bane. Oh, let's do Robin. Oh, and then with this game, it just felt so just over. Like there's so much stuff to do. There's so much things. I mean, and then the whole plot of there's Joker filled his blood with toxins and then injected 5 different people, right? Like,
Right.
listen, I don't want to
He's in
rag on it.
Batman's head, man.
He
That's
is.
how he's in the whole game.
He is. And it's certainly not the first time we see a story like this where, there's a battle going on with someone's internal dialogue from a poison or from a thing or, this or that, where they're trying to, they have to defeat that inner monologue. And, it's not that it's done poorly. But of the 3 main Arkham games that Rocksteady made, this one's probably my least favorite. But not because it's not a good game, just because it isn't as good as the other ones.
Yeah. I liked it quite a bit. The Batmobile was a bit much for me. Like, it was like a kid with a new toy. Like, oh, I'm going to jam this into every mission.
Yeah.
And it's like, even the Riddler, like, missions with the Batmobile is like, because
Yeah.
it's hard to control anyway.
It was very difficult to control.
And then you're having all these tank battles with it, and you're trying. It was pretty frustrating. And then the whole thing with the Arkham Knight himself, they were like making this big deal about, oh, it's this brand new character. You've never seen this person before. It's Jason Todd. Yeah,
Right.
He's been around for years. Right, nothing new there.
It's literally an exact rip of from a comic series. I think there was a direct-to-video animated movie that basically had Jason Todd. And actually, it might have been what I mentioned earlier, the
Under the Red Hood.
Hood. Yeah. So, and that's fine. That's the way you want to go with it. That's the way you're going to go with it. It was a new take on that story, I guess.
I would have been better with it if they just said, yeah, Jason Todd's back and he's going to kick the shit out of Batman, right? I mean,
right. I know.
I mean, who are they trying to fool here? Most of these people that are into these games already know who Jason Todd is, right?
That's true.
And if they don't know, they wouldn't care, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. If they're there to play a Batman game just to play a Batman game, they're not going to care who he is. But the comic book man,
comic book guy.
Comic book guy,
Excuse me.
guys of the world. Well, actually, would be all over those guys, anyways. And from what I remember, the comic purists were not necessarily happy with the reveal of Jason Todd being
no, they're pissed.
The Arkham Knight. So it was like, oh, I mean, he was already the Red Hood. Why is it? And like, whatever, man. It's a different universe. You guys, of all people, should understand multiverses.
Right.
But yeah,
me personally, I wasn't that upset. I mean, I was like, whatever, that's fine. It's Jason Todd, but I mean, he looked cool. Like, I thought the game over itself was pretty good. Like you said, it's not as good as Arkham City, probably not good as Asylum, but pretty good. A little better than Origins. I would have dumped all that Batmobile stuff or limited it, but other than that, I mean, it's pretty good. I love the parts where you just like use the grapnel gun and go up to a ledge and you turn around and the Joker is like sitting there talking to you and psyche. That was always fun.
That was a cool thing. And what's interesting too, like you mentioned, like kind of getting rid of the Batmobile for that kind of thing. I didn't feel like ever that the scope of the city matched the speed and the power of the Batmobile.
Oh, not at
all. If that makes sense, right? So, and I think about like, okay, I don't know if you played the most recent Spider-Man release on PS4. You don't get a vehicle in that game, right? You just use your superpowers. You fly around New York with the webs. You get across pretty quick, right? And then you have fast travel if you don't want to, take the time to swing from Lower Manhattan to Harlem, right? So I don't see why you couldn't do that also with the fact that you can use Batman's grappling hook, and then he can also still, glide with his cape and things like that. They had that pretty well established in the games. And then you could scale the city down a smidge. That would be probably my, you don't need a full size, Gotham to drive around with a battle tank, in my opinion. And a lot of those Batmobile like fighting and stuff like that is just, I don't know. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me to do it that way. But
there was shoehorned in is what it felt like to me.
Yeah. So, but it was all in all, it was a game series that came out at the right time. It hit the right gameplay mechanics that were really popular at the time. Um, and then, they kind of tapped in with, the next Batman released after Arkham Knight was the Telltale series. We briefly
Hmm.
mentioned it, when Sandy and I discussed, point and click adventure and Telltale games as a whole. I played some of the first episode of this Batman series. Did you get to play chance to play this one?
No, I remember in your previous episode when you were talking about those games that you had played the Back to the Future game. Like
Yeah,
that's how I got introduced to the Telltale games, and I wasn't that impressed. I used to play point and click games when I was a kid,
sure.
like King's Quest and Indiana Jones: The Fate of Atlantis, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. It just seemed very elementary and not really taking much thought. You just clicked around until you finally got the right answer, and so I was kind of turned off from the Back to the Future game. So I didn't. I was like, I don't really want to deal with this with Batman too. So I
Sure.
never played it.
Yeah, the Batman one,
I'm a terrible Bat fan.
I don't think you are, and especially too, like, with the Telltale stuff, and we discussed this some, is, they release those games episodically, um,
Right.
and that can be both a positive and a negative. The positive is you can release games faster. The negative is that, now you're charging people multiple times, right?
Right.
Unless you get the season pass or whatever, and that, I don't know too many people that did that because, if you don't like episode one, you don't want to keep buying the other episodes, right? I think
Exactly.
I got episode one as like a free PlayStation Plus membership game. So I played that some. It was, it was fine. It was a lot of, you'll remember the game I'm thinking of here. It was the QuickTime game. That was the arcade game with the Knight and the Dragon Slayer.
Dragon's Lair. Hell yeah.
So a lot of that mechanic, right? Okay, Catwoman is
Exactly. Yeah.
kicking left, you push right. So she kicks right, you push left. That was kind of how, and that's fine, and that it hits a certain thing. But really since that point, they tried to do like the Arkham series with the VR. I don't know how up to date with VR you are. I hate VR. I
Not a fan.
As a man that wears glasses for depth perception, um,
Yeah.
it throws me off to either I can't take my glasses off and put VR on and experience VR. My eyes just don't work that way. Same thing with seeing 3D movies. I just don't do it anymore. It's
Yeah.
it costs extra money anyways, and as a dad, I'm inclined to not do that. Right? We
Right.
don't want we don't like to spend, but I can get the same movie
Frugal.
ticket. I can see the same movie for $12, and you're charging me $22.50
Right.
for paper glasses, right?
Right.
So that's my dad take on it.
Two
But VR,
dimensions is fine. That's plenty of dimensions. What do
exactly.
you need another one
When I was
for?
your age, there was only one dimension. Yeah, shut the door. We're not air conditioning the outside.
That's right.
So, but yeah, I mean, they tried to do some different spin-offs of the Arkham games. Didn't really. I mean, Batman's kind of puttered here and there in the past few years. So when this year's big, video game shows obviously canceled due to COVID-19. I don't remember there being too many rumblings thinking that we were going to get something. But
Yeah.
as Batman fans, we don't only get one game; we have two games coming out,
Kind
which
of
I thought
surprised.
was, yeah, I was surprised too. And the first trailer that I saw was for Gotham Knights. And
Hmm.
Gotham Knights, they kind of set the stage in the trailer for the death of Bruce. Good Lord, Bruce Wayne, the
Yeah.
death of Bruce Wayne, and it kind of activates the others to kind of step into his place as the primaries. So you have Nightwing, you have Robin, and you have Batgirl, and I believe Jason Todd is the fourth
Right.
as Red
Red
Hood.
Hood. Yep.
And so, of course, you have Dick Grayson, the original Robin, taking up the mantle of Nightwing. You have Barbara Gordon as Batgirl, and then Tim Drake, the most recent iteration of Robin,
Right.
or the youngest iteration, I should say, taking up the mantle there. Um, it looks really good. This one actually is being published developed by WB Montreal, and is being published by Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment. So they are building this one out. It looks interesting. I would like to see more. It is it's the Court of Owls story from the comic books.
Mm-hmm.
For those that are super familiar with that. So, it was a good teaser trailer. It definitely got people talking. Now, what was your first impression of this one?
So when I first heard about it, I was confused, probably like a lot of people. So this thing is called Gotham Knights, right? But it's not in the same universe as Batman Arkham Knight, right?
Right.
They start off the trailer with Batman's dead and here's a message from him.
Yeah.
Which is how Arkham Knight ended, right?
Mm-hmm.
Batman blows himself up. So, we don't know if he's dead or alive or whatever. Who knows if we'll ever find out in that universe. But it's a different universe, but it's also called Knight. A lot of the look and feel of the characters and the costumes and everything looks just like the Arkham universe. And it's not by Rocksteady. It's by the other ones. The ones that made the game that most people aren't that thrilled with. Yeah. So I was completely confused on all that part, right?
Yeah.
The game itself looks pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
It looks like we're gonna get co-op in it, so that'd be fun. I read also that you don't have to just pick, like, if somebody picks Red Hood and you want to be Red Hood too, you can both be Red Hood. Now, how that's gonna work in universe, I don't know. Maybe there'll be some kind of multiverse thing. I don't know. But,
maybe.
Or
maybe it doesn't matter.
Maybe it doesn't matter. They don't care.
maybe the cutscenes are, whoever's supposed to be there is going to be there in the cutscene, regardless of who you're playing as.
But I think it's only 2-player co-op. I don't think you can play all 4 at once. I'm not sure on that. They've been kind of cagey on all this stuff.
Yeah, there's not been a whole lot of details.
They've just had the one trailer, I think, where they show Bat as a bad girl and Red Hood, or one of them.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's Robin. I don't know. I remember it's Batgirl, and they go fight Dr. Freeze, right? One of the things that threw a lot of nerds off, I don't really care that much, is that when they were hitting Dr. Freeze, there were point totals flying off. So it's more like an RPG. And the other thing is, apparently you can gear up and you have to grind and all this stuff. So it's more like RPG elements rather than the traditional Arkham Asylum games, which there was some in that too, where you'd make enough points and you could buy some upgrades and stuff. So I don't know why they're super surprised at that, but I don't know. It's definitely interesting. I'm definitely gonna give it a shot. It looks like something I'd really like, and I think the co-op part is really appealing. If I can get you or somebody else to play with me, or I can get my son, who's a grown man now, but if I can get somebody like that to play it, I think that would be pretty fun. It looks good to me. I don't know. It's different.
I think it looks different but good, right? I mean, it definitely. And we're getting to this next one that file under extremely different. You speak to the confusion of, because immediately when I heard Gotham Knights, I just thought in my head, okay, it's a co-op in that game series, right? It's plural, same name scheme. WB's publishing it, and then you come to find out, no, there's another game coming out that's going to be in that same universe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, which one? What game is that? That'd be Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League.
Right.
Which
makes perfect sense, right?
Which makes perfect sense. What's funny is I really, 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 really enjoyed the trailer for Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League. Tara Strong is back to voice Harley Quinn. She did the voice back in the animated series. Tara Strong has done the voice of most of my childhood, both male and female characters. Of course, we actually have a wrestling tie-in here, Dan, with the voice of King Shark being done by none other than Joe Sanoa, aka
Samoa
Joe. So, which was a nice little wrinkle there to that trailer.
All ties together. Impact
it really
Wrestling.
Does. It really does. Exactly, right? So, you're looking at this one, and they're just kind of sitting on a rooftop. It's, Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, and King Shark. Which, of the villains in the DC universe, they're probably the least intimidating for the most part.
They're sea level at best.
Sea level at best, with the exception of Harley Quinn because of her association with of course, the
Right.
Joker. But I mean, there's a lot of humor in this trailer. There's a lot of things, and what's funny is this is the one that you get the 4-player cooperative mode
Right.
available to you, and somehow it is the one that ties in to the Arkham series.
Which in that trailer, I don't know how that ties in because it's got Superman, who's apparently a bad guy now, right? And it's
Yep.
got Brainiac, who's a Superman villain. And it's just strange is how I describe it. Which with Suicide Squad and Harley Quinn and all that, strange is kind of the rule of the day.
It is.
But
it is.
It is weird how it's supposed to tie into the previous games and the other one isn't, right? It's just
right. It's a completely different art style. It's just but here's the
it's
thing,
bright, colorful, and
very bright and colorful because. But here's the thing, and I think that we'll see a lot of tie-in with James Gunn's new Suicide Squad movie, and I believe he's involved some with the game as well, making sure it kind of fits where he's taking those characters. So it'd be interesting to see if John Cena's Peacemaker character shows up, or different things like that, because it looks like they're going to do some pretty big integration with the rest of what happens in the DC world, right? Like you mentioned, Brainiac is of course a Superman villain. Name of the thing is Kill the Justice League.
So obviously he takes over the Justice League, and you're going to have to go fight, the Flash and Green Lantern, which I'm all about that, man. When I said when I was playing DC Universe Online, that's my shit.
Yeah, it seems like they're positioning you in that true anti-hero role, just like the Suicide Squad is. So hey, this one caught my eye a little bit more than Gotham Knights. It got me a little bit more excited because it does feel like a more fun, bright, colorful gameplay that you can pop in and pop out. If you're playing solo,
a lot more humor in this one.
A lot more humor. Yeah, so we'll definitely see how that ties in. This one is made by Rocksteady, so they're the ones behind this one, of course. It's still going to be published by Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, so it kind of makes you think, okay, why are they putting 2 Batman games out at pretty much the same time? Other than kind of goes back full circle with those movie licenses, right? The big movies coming out, you want to have something interactive to tie in with it, right? I mean, I had a Batman Tiger Electronics handheld back in the day, right? I mean, they were willing to put everything on everything. So I think there's probably a little bit with that with the Suicide Squad game. I don't know. I don't understand why we needed Gotham Knights to come out now. I'm not mad about it.
I mean, maybe they're gonna do some sort of thing with the new Batman movie with what's his name, Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know if he's actually going to appear in the game or anything. It's obviously a totally different universe and everything, but maybe they'll have buy this game and you get a movie ticket or something like that.
Yeah.
But the Suicide Squad, it definitely ties in more to the new Suicide Squad movie. Now, this new game for the Suicide Squad, does it come out next year or does it come out in 2022? I thought they were saying it was going to come out in 2 years, whereas the Knights was going to come out next year.
So, yeah, you're right. So the release date that we have for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is 2022. Gotham Knights was 2021. And Gotham Knights, when they did the reveal, did look like more of a finished game than Suicide Squad did. Yeah, they were
showing some gameplay and stuff, whereas with Suicide Squad, it was just the trailer, right?
Right, so. Exactly. Which was still awesome. Still great to see both of those where they're at. And, listen, as long as Suicide Squad is half as good as what I think the movie is going to be, I think it'll be fine. I'm really excited for the James Gunn Suicide Squad movie because, we've seen what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's almost kind of a similar thing, right? Unlikely heroes and goofballs and humor.
Right.
So
odd couples, family.
Exactly.
So did you like the first Suicide Squad movie?
Not at all. No.
Yeah, I was not a fan either. It was pretty generic, most of it.
Yeah, and my biggest problem with it, and not to get on a huge movie tangent, they spent so much time giving exposition to characters
Hmm.
that like I didn't need Amanda Waller giving me a 3.5 minute introduction for every member of the Suicide Squad, and then
Right.
God bless him, but I don't really need to see Ike Barinholtz as a security guard character type being,
Right.
I don't know. I felt like it was a mess. They were trying to do too much tie-in with Jared Leto's Joker, and they were
Ugh.
teasing that. And, right, I was not a fan of that Joker at all.
No.
So and I didn't like that. I saw Suicide Squad in the theaters. I wish I hadn't. I
Yeah.
could probably use that $10 to buy like a Frappuccino at Starbucks or something. I don't know, but something that
Out
would
of
have
the
been
recent DC movies, it was definitely the worst. I mean, I've liked
yeah.
I've liked it. Obviously, the Nolan movies. Um, I even have some soft spots for like Batman versus Superman and the first Superman movie, and obviously Wonder Woman was amazing.
Yeah, I
Um,
think Wonder Woman sets the bar for what DC movies can and should be. I'm interested
yeah,
to see what the new Wonder Woman movie looks like. That one looks pretty good. And
set in my
actually,
wheelhouse, man. 1984. You got New Order on the soundtrack. Like it's like it's custom made for me. I
yeah,
love it.
exactly. Yeah, no, I actually, and we'll get on with our night with this, but I actually, for what it was, I actually thought Aquaman was a fun watch. It
Yeah.
was, it was it was a dumb movie, but it was enjoyable, right?
I
You
wasn't
know,
expecting a lot, but it was entertaining, and that's all I asked for in my comic book
it
movies,
was it
right?
was a great movie. I watched it on a flight, and it was like the perfect flight movie, right? Like
Right.
the only other movie I think that is up there with me for like best movie to watch on a plane was I watched Hobbs and Shaw on the plane.
Yep.
Because
That's a plane movie.
you just want to just turn your mind off and just watch some fast paced nonsense. And so like Aquaman, Hobbs and Shaw, and probably really any of the other Fast and the Furious
Hmm.
movies would be have a good fit there. But anywho, hey, Batman video games, they've been around for really going on 40 years, if you include the Commodore 64 and stuff back there. They're not going anywhere. We're going to keep
Yeah.
getting Batman games. Hopefully, we continue to raise the bar like the Arkham series did. I got high hopes for these next two. I got high hopes for what's happening in Impact Wrestling coming back. Um,
Definitely.
Getting ready for Bound for Glory. Um, Before we go though, Dan, who is obviously our guest host here, Dan, you've put together a little giveaway here.
Oh yeah, almost forgot. Right. So we have
Yeah.
some stuff to give away. Um, I'll let you decide how it's given out. But what we have a Kurt Angle action figure that I purchased at the local collectible shop Retro Rat here in Clearwater, Florida. If you ever make it down here, this will be my free plug for them. This is actually a WWE Kurt Angle figure, but you know what? He's wearing like basically the same gear. He's got the shaved head. He doesn't have the stubble on his face
Right.
like he did a lot in TNA. And he's not bloody or anything. He's not all perked up in this, I don't think. But I felt it fit, and I figured he's one of my favorite wrestlers, so we'll give that away to somebody. We've got a Scarecrow Funko Pop from Arkham Knight. Then we also have a an outdated calendar. It's
Woo!
a Batman Arkham calendar. Obviously the dates aren't up to date, but it's still got great artwork on it. It doesn't have like the dates on the artwork. So if you want to, take some of that artwork of Batman or Mr. Freeze or Robin or whatever, I
Yeah.
was going to take it myself and put it up in my rumpus room area, but I decided I'd give it away. So once I got drafted onto the podcast here.
That's awesome, and we certainly appreciate the giveaway stuff here. And we quickly discussed this earlier, but I think that the best way to do it is for the listeners, go ahead and suggest a video game topic that you want to hear covered by the 8-Bit Suplex. You can tweet at us at 8-Bit Suplex, or you can send an email to 8bitsuplex@gmail.com. And your suggestion will get you an entry. We'll give it a couple weeks just to make sure everyone gets a chance to listen to this episode. And then obviously when I post the episode and I reference it on Twitter, I'll make sure everyone knows that they need to check out the episode for the giveaway details. But this is a pretty awesome prize pack. You sent me a picture of the Scarecrow Funko Pop, and that guy is pretty awesome. So if for no other reason, besides that Funko Pop, send us send us a suggestion, and if we will either do a random name or whichever topic we choose to go with on the air. Well, I'll discuss that with Sandy, and maybe we'll have Dan back to discuss the topic depending on what it is, and if Dan's available. And whoever gets their topic picked, we'll shoot the giveaway your way.
Yeah. Good luck, guys.
So with that, I do want to always say thank you to Rich Latta of One Nation Radio for our intro and outro music. It's really cool 8-bit beat that he threw together for us. You follow us, of course, like I said, on Twitter at 8-bit suplex. You can follow, of course, the Social Suplex Podcast Network at Social Suplex on Twitter and Instagram. You can go ahead and follow Sandy at Sailor Zelda. Dan, you want to throw out your Twitter handle as well? Because I will say this, as a completely independent, objective statement, Dan puts together some of the best wrestling memes that you'd ever see. So Dan,
all I use my Twitter for.
It's glorious. So Dan, why don't you throw your Twitter handle out there?
Yeah, it's at Coffin_Dan on Twitter. Like Josh says, I make Simpsons memes, wrestling memes, Simpsons wrestling memes, and then I like dunking on stupid politicians. That's like all I use my Twitter for. So
I think actually that's what Twitter was made for, was memes and back talking politicians.
It's perfect for that. Don't use it for anything else. That's all you really need it for.
It's a great forum for that. Definitely also head on over to prowrestlingtees.com and slash, I believe it's / Social Suplex. I'm double checking right now because I should have done this before.
I looked up 8-bit suplex on there the other day and it came up. So
did it? Okay, so perfect. So if you head on over to Pro Wrestling Tees, you can either search for Social Suplex or 8-bit suplex. We do have a shirt on there. Some of the other shows on the Social Suplex Podcast Network have shows on there, and that is the correct URL. It is prowrestlingtees.com/social suplex. You can get the Social Suplex shirt, the One Nation Radio shirt, the Ricky and Clive shirt, the Keeping It Strong Style shirt, and of course the 8-bit suplex shirt. Our shirt is a little different in that it's white, and then we have a very colorful logo, just like our old favorite 8 and 16-bit video games. So definitely go ahead and check those out. Check out all of the other podcasts on the network. Like we've mentioned several times here, you got Keeping It Strong Style with Jeremy and Josh, One Nation Radio with Rich and James, the Ricky and Clive Show with Ricky and Clive, Grave Consequences, which of course is our new show covering Lucha Underground with Caleb and Maserati, and some of the other shows too. Definitely make sure you talk. Grown Men Watch the Shit is coming out. They're coming back with a return episode, I think next week. I know I'm forgetting. So All Things Elite is another great show to listen to for those that are fans of All Elite Wrestling. And if you go listen to that one, tell Floyd I sent you, and tell him that Cody sucks. And I don't want you guys to get blocked by Floyd on social media. Don't tell him that. But no, seriously, go check out all the shows. Check out everything on the Social Suplex Podcast Network feed. Back next week, we think, is going to be Sandy Gaviria, returning from, of course, being an international TV superstar on the Raw Underground as an extra. And hopefully she has one more spot. I think that she's taping. But we'll definitely see if Sandy wants to talk a little bit about that experience next week. But Dan, thanks for coming on. This is a lot of fun. Dan and I have spent several car trips to Jacksonville and back, talking to each other, keeping each other awake at the wheel. I knew it would be an easy conversation with you, bud, and I'm happy that you agreed to come on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was nervous at first, but obviously we got over that and probably bored people to tears with our hours and hours of discussion. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Maybe I'll come back someday, make my second spot.
All right, sounds good.
If you'll have me.
Oh, definitely. Listen, anybody that comes on this podcast and is willing to talk to me for 2.5, 3 hours, definitely deserves to do whatever they want if they want to come back. But that said, once again, as the dad edition of this podcast ends, I want to remind you, of course, to shut your front door because you are not air conditioning the outside. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.